Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming this evening. Apologies for the delay. The flight got delayed. As you know, we've been having consultations throughout Fiji on the budget, and today we are here. On Wednesday we are in Ra, and that's the last one. So today is the second last set of public consultation we are having for this 22-2023 budget. I'll just do a short presentation on the budget, on some of the parameters around what are the things we consider when we develop a budget, what are the kind of issues that we have to take into account, and indeed where we've come from, that is, in what has been the state of the economy, and then open up the floor for any questions you may have or any submissions. We'd rather that if you have some personal issues, we've got staff at the back, you can go and talk to them about it, rather than getting into a sort of one-on-one whilst depriving other people of the time or the opportunity to ask specific questions or make specific submissions on the budget itself. So where have we been? As you know, the COVID-19 actually had a huge impact on the economy. Our economy, of course, shrunk and contracted by 17% as a result of the border shutting down. It's not something peculiar only to Fiji. It happened throughout the world. Australia, New Zealand, USA, India, UK, everywhere else was shut down, and all economies actually contracted. We lost about $4.6 billion in GDP over the last 2 years. In other words, the GDP became much smaller. As the economy became much smaller, it contracted significantly. And we lost about $4 billion in foreign exchange. When Georgia goes to buy a ship from Canada, he doesn't pay in Fijian dollars, he pays in Canadian dollars. So we need foreign exchange to be able to trade. All the cars you see sitting outside, we buy in Japanese yen. All the fuel that's used to run those cars are bought in US dollars from Singapore. So you need to have enough foreign currency to be able to trade. Tourists actually bring foreign currency for us, as does exports, for example. So because the tourists not coming in, we lost about $4 billion in tourism earnings in foreign exchange. Government's revenue went down by half overnight. Just basically halved overnight, because tourists, as you know, when they come in, they pay departure tax when they leave, they pay STT, used to pay STT, they pay ECAL, they buy things, they pay VAT. And it was not just from the tourists itself, of course. When people lose their jobs, for example, if they're flying from Fiji Airways or they're working at the airport, they're working at ATS, the hotel workers, those other businesses that are dependent on those people, they also get affected. The example that I've been giving is that when you go outside Nadi airport, just before you enter the airport, there's a bunch of trees around the railway line, and over there you'll see mainly women who sell boiled EV, lobo packs, roti parcel, mitai, all those things. Their customers are not the tourists. The customers are the people who work at AFL, people who work at ATS, people who work at Fiji Airways. They buy their lunch from them. They are the customers. So now when there's nobody working at the airport, there's nobody working at ATS or Fiji Airways, these people also don't get any money. The lady you see when you go to the hotels at Hilton, they've given them a corner. These ladies are making handicraft, they're making these beads and shells and bracelets and all of that. They're not working for Hilton. They just give them a space. They no longer have money too. So they've lost out on the income. There's a huge spiraling effect. So over 100,000 Fijians became either unemployed or had reduced hours. Amongst look at most of these are tourism-driven countries. You can see all of their Maldives contracted by 33.5%. A lot of the tourists actually come from Europe, they come from Ukraine, they come from Russia, they come from Europe. They also get tourists from China too. I think they had about 1.4 million tourists, in excess of 1 million in any case. And these other countries like St. Lucia, these are all tourism countries in the Caribbean. They contracted also quite significantly. We over here, we contracted too. Government provided $500 million in what we call, income support. Many of you over here would have got two rounds of 360, 2 rounds of $50, 1 round of $90. Those of you in FNPF, if you lost your jobs, if your money in your general account finished, we paid $225 a fortnight into your FNPF accounts. It's all up, those people who sell at the markets, we pay the market fees, etc. So the economy was growing, of course, for 9 years straight. And then the pandemic came along and we contracted quite significantly. We are expected to grow now by 12.4% this year. It's obviously in double digits. The reason why it's in double digits is because we're starting with a lower base. So that's why it's obviously 12.4%. The only reason why we were able to open up the borders, of course, as you know, early last year, people started to panic about 4,000 or 5,000 people had COVID. People did not know what was going to happen. But the moment that vaccines were mentioned, we went out and used all diplomatic efforts. The Prime Minister went to all our bilateral partners, Australia, New Zealand, India, USA, various other countries, saying we need access to vaccine. We went and spoke to the World Bank, IMF, ADB, because we knew that the moment there's a cure for a pandemic or there's a vaccine, all the big countries, the big boys and girls will line up and they'll get the first bite of the cherry. Because they've got large orders, right? USA's got nearly 300 million people. So if they're going to order vaccines, they'll order 600 million doses because you need 2 doses. Little Fiji does not even have 1 million people. We don't even have 900,000 people. We have about 895,000 people. So when we go and place an order, it's only for about 1.8 million doses. So who's going to get the contract first? Whose orders will be filled first? Person who placed 600 million dose order, or person who placed 1.8 million doses? All of you in this room who've been vaccinated, none of you have paid a single cent for the vaccine. First dose, second dose. Neither have we as a government. Because we actually got it from India, the first 100 doses. The Indians gave us 100 doses, then the Australians gave us doses, the New Zealanders gave us doses, the Americans are giving us doses, and now the French are giving us doses too. Of course, it costs us money to administer it. We have to pay the nurses' wages, put them on a boat, on a horse, on wherever else it is to go and vaccinate people. That costs money, but the actual medicine did not cost us money. The vaccine did not cost us money. Now, we had a no jab, no job policy. Boats could only carry people at 50%, taxis only, 50% passengers, etc. All of those measures were put in place because we knew what the goal was. And once that goal was achieved, we were able to open up our borders on the 1st of December. People had lockdowns, we had bubbles, we had masks, all those types of things. Now, as a result of all of the steps being taken with the vaccination, we became in such a short period of time, we became the highest, most vaccinated country in the developing world. 4,000 or 5,000 cases in about March, April, then we became, borders were open. Over 90% of Fijians are now vaccinated. So, as I mentioned, we set to grow for about 12.4%. That's where the growth is. You can see the tourism numbers. In 2019, we had about 894,000 tourists that came to Fiji. If the COVID had not happened, we would have exceeded 1 million by now. Much more. But you can see last year we had only 32,000 tourists. We expect to get about 492,000 tourists this year. Now, which is good, but of course it's not the same as that. Right? A huge difference there. Where are the tourists coming from? They're coming from Australia mainly. So 90%, if you look at the month of May, and you look at the month of May in 2019, compared to the month of May in 2022, we've got about 95% of those people who came have actually returned, I mean the number-wise. New Zealand has just recently opened up their borders to their citizens in terms of going and coming in and out of the country. 2/3. We're of course getting a lot of Americans too, but not as high as the Australians. The June, July bookings are looking pretty good, and in fact much better. Now, everybody's talking about the price of fuel, price of goods. They've all gone up significantly throughout the world, and that's a fact. Nobody can deny that. As we know that fuel prices are now over US $100 a barrel. About 18 months ago, it was about $24 US a barrel. Now it's gone up to actually $120 US a barrel. Highly significant. We don't, of course, control the price of fuel or set the price of fuel. The world market sets it. Wheat has gone up significantly, fertilizer. There are two things actually. First thing was, before the Russia-Ukraine war, the price of things were going up. Freight actually became quite expensive because of the COVID lockdown. China was still in a lockdown. A lot of containers are locked up in China. Borders weren't open, so the availability of containers were restricted. And then supply chain issues. So like this lady is recording me at the moment in her phone. There's a microchip that's used to record this or use this phone. The microchip is made out of a particular metal. That metal is, extracted from the ground. When the countries are in lockdown, there's no mining carried out. So less microchips available, or less metal available to make microchips. But people still want mobile phones, so the price of it will go up. Yongona before Winston, $85 a kilo. After Winston, $185 a kilo. Supply demand. Yongona plantations got damaged, but people still drink it at the same rate. The demand for it, right? Long beans before the cyclone is $2 a bundle. After the cyclone, $5. Same thing with bananas, after Cyclone Winston, price went up. Supply and demand issue. That's precisely what's actually happening in the world too. Now, Russia-Ukraine war, of course, gave it another sort of level to it altogether. A lot of people did not necessarily know this, but Russia is the third largest producer of oil in the world. There's a direct gas pipeline from Russia to Germany. They supply cooking gas and stuff like that. That's no longer there because Russia is being punished by USA and Europe saying, why did you invade Ukraine? Trade ban. Don't do trading with them. So less supply of gas, price of gas will go up. I'll show you a video later on which shows you about the amount of food that Ukraine actually makes or grows that feeds about 400 million people in the world. A lot of people don't realize this. All of you eat roti, puruni, bambakau, pani keke, bread, scone, cake, everything is made out of wheat. Every single of those items I've just mentioned is made out of wheat. We don't grow wheat in Fiji. We only make flour in Fiji. Punja and Sons from Nabutu in Lautoka, flour mills of Fiji in Walubay in Suva. They buy their wheat from Australia. They bring it here, they grind it, they put some vitamins in it, and you get flour. You don't go and buy it from them, from the factory directly, you buy it from the supermarket. So before they sell it to the supermarket, they can't sell it at any price. It's a price control item. So they go to FCCC, Fijian Competition Consumer Commission, and they say, look, we bought our wheat, let's say $300 a ton. This is our labor cost, electricity cost, storage cost, etc., etc. Then FCCC say, you can only sell it for no more than this. This is the margin you can make. Then at that price, they sell it to the supermarket. Then Shop and Save will go, before they sell it to you, they'll go to FCCC, say, I'm renting a shop here in Nasinu, this is my rental cost, my labor cost, electricity cost. They'll say, okay, you can make only this much margin before they sell it to you. It's price control. But if the price of it goes up from $300 to $400 a ton, obviously the price will get passed on to you. That's what happens. If he imports tin fish from New Zealand, he's got a business to sell it in Nasino, and the landed cost for him is $5 a tin. If tomorrow, because of freight costs, everything goes up, and he's now paying $7, he's not going to sell it to you for $7. If he was bringing it at $5, he will probably sell it to you at $7. But if he's now going to bring it at $7, sell it to you for $9. You can't expect him to sell anything at the same price. Otherwise he'll go out of business. What's the point of him importing it? So that's what's actually happening. So certain items are price controlled. Over here you can see that the red line here is what we call imported inflation. Inflation brought from overseas. Domestic inflation. The price of goods and services that's made in Fiji. But sometimes an imported item can have an impact on the domestic item. Very simple. If you are growing vegetables and you're selling, everything at one particular price, but tomorrow, because of the fertilizer you're using to grow your vegetables has gone up in price, you will put up the price of your vegetables also. It gets passed on. So fertilizer is an imported item, used for domestic purposes, and the price will go up. Same thing, shipping company. The price of fuel has increased. He of course will want to increase the fare because he now has a larger cost. So he'll need to increase. Like bus companies have said to us, We want to increase the bus fare, otherwise there's no point running the buses. So they've got a bus fare increase. We have somebody independently that assesses all of that. So I will show you the first video. Which one? This one? Yeah? Basically this tells you about the impact of the lack of supply of food from Ukraine and the general increase in prices all over the world.
Previously, we were buying the packet 140. For now, it is 180. And the salad, we used to buy around 180 per liter. But for now, 300 shillings, it's really tough for us.
Ukraine grows enough food to feed 400 million people on planet Earth. So when the farmers on the battlefields aren't planting or aren't harvesting, what impact do you think that's going to have? You've got a catastrophe knocking and looming on the door for the fall. That will be not a price issue, but a supply issue, availability of food for people around the world, and that will be a catastrophe on top of a catastrophe.
Source, particularly North Africa and Middle East, of carbohydrates is bread. You see that from wheat. Not the kind of bread you have long road there, like flat breads. That's the only source of carbohydrates. We in Fiji have dal and cassava. We have uto. We have those alternatives. It can be grown locally. But the fact of the matter is that we still need flour for certain things. The price of that is going up. Worst case scenario, we have that. And obviously this is why 2 years ago, when COVID took place, we started even encouraging people to grow their gardens at home, started giving out sick leaves because we knew this would be impact, for example, on food supply. That's what would happen. Assuming that the borders would shut down completely, then the entire world would have been affected on a prolonged basis. The other point about managing the economy, of course, is that when you manage the economy, you have to be aware of what's the impact of something like COVID. Because tourism brings in the bulk of our foreign reserves and foreign currency, we knew we had to pursue something different. All governments in the world borrow money. Governments aren't there to make really profit. There's certain services we provide that we can't make money out of. If you're going to build the street lights, put street lights here, put new footpaths here, we don't come and ask you for money. These people are arguing, oh, that's your money. It's not government's money, but it's how you manage that money. Not everybody pays tax in Fiji. Everybody that earns less than $30,000 in this country does not pay any personal income tax. You don't pay VAT on 21 items. Yet, we have to provide the services. We have to ensure that we manage this finance as well. So, governments borrow money. In Fiji, since we manage the economy, what we do is that we try and borrow 70% of the things we need to borrow, we borrow it from we borrowed locally. Oh, sorry, I forgot about that. Sorry. We borrow 70%. What we borrow? We borrow locally. Insurance companies like to buy government bonds, banks, because they make money from lending us money, because we pay interest. FNPF, etc. 70% is borrowed locally, 30% is from offshore, plus or minus 5%. The reason generally we don't like to borrow more money from offshore is because you have what we call foreign currency exposure. Because today if you borrow $1 US, for you to pay back would be 2 Fijian dollars. But if the value of your dollar decreases or the value of their dollar increases, you'll have to pay more. And you don't know exactly what you'll have to end up paying. That's what we call management of a foreign currency. If you borrow domestically, if you're going to borrow 50 million Fijian, you know you have to pay back 50 million Fijian. However, in this period, what we did, we flipped it around. We borrowed more from offshore. The reason why we borrowed more from offshore was because we knew our foreign reserves would get depleted if the tourists kept on not coming to Fiji. But we still need to trade. We still need to buy baby milk from overseas. We still need to buy fuel, medicine, all those things. International Monetary Fund says you should have at least 3 months of foreign reserves to be able to trade. That's critically important to do that. So those are some of the measures we took. Some countries weren't agile enough or quick enough to be able to do that. Because they had some pre-existing conditions, and others, of course, they did not respond well. I'll show you a video now from Sri Lanka to show you what actually happened there as a result of them not managing things really well, and what happened to the value of the dollar, and indeed the inability to actually pay back their loans and have enough foreign reserves. And it's led to a lot of socio-economic issues, which is essentially food items. There's one other thing in the background. Before the pandemic, they made some decisions that actually led them to a lot of problems. One day they just decided to ban certain fertilizers. And as a result of that, a lot of the farmers, their yield, if they're producing something one ton, they start producing only half a ton. If they're producing 50 tons of something, they start producing only 25 tons because the yields weren't there. So therefore, they ended up importing a lot of food from overseas. Press it again.
Helping put food on the table. Community kitchens like this are starting up around Sri Lanka as people struggle with its worst economic crisis in more than 70 years. Food inflation has hit nearly 60%. And many people are finding it difficult to cope.
Most of these community who are coming today or been coming are surviving with 2 meals. So we are giving them the responsibility of surviving for 1 meal, and we are saying, right, we will support you with 1 meal, but a good healthy meal.
Few now get to eat this well.
It's very difficult. We rarely get food like this. Only my husband is working, but what he earns for a day is not enough to feed the 3 of us now.
Tax cuts 3 years ago slashed government revenue by more than $2 billion. The tourism industry was then damaged by the Easter bombings and the pandemic. Now there is no money to import fuel, medicine, cooking gas or food.
Right now, actually, our main focuses are on food banks, on community kitchens, and again, long to medium term community gardens and home gardens, because we can give rations, but it's very short term.
The government is appealing for help.
We urgently require the assistance of our friends in the international community to ensure that our immediate needs in terms of the importation of essential medicine, food supply, and fuel.
India and China have sent food and medicine in recent days. The opposition says the government has weakened the economy through populist policies and mismanagement. A nationwide campaign dubbed Gota Go Home has been running for 2 months, calling on the president to resign. The government is seeking a loan package from the International Monetary Fund or IMF. Critics say it'll take too long, even if agreed, and people need action now.
Tens of thousands of Sri Lankans are going hungry amid the country's worst economic crisis in decades. Community kitchens like this can only feed a fraction of them. Minal Fernandez, Al Jazeera, Colombo.
look at inflation throughout the world, inflation has increased in USA, it's about 8.5%. European area is 7.4%. Australia is 5.1%. We're sitting at about 5% at the moment. New Zealand is 6.9%. United Kingdom is 9.1%. Japan is the lowest at the moment, is 1.2% only. The World Food Organization tracks the price of food, cereal, meat price, oil price, dairy price, and of course sugar. You can see how all of them are actually trending. All of them are going up. Sugar has kind of remained flat, which is not that much good news for us because our sugar price obviously is not, we're not getting as much money. But all the other areas you can see that the price of those things have increased quite significantly globally. So we zero-rated VAT on 21 items. As you know that in Fijian history, we've never had 21 items being zero-rated VAT. Some time back, we used to have about 6 items. They weren't necessarily everyday items. Some of it were, some of it weren't. If you look at all these items here, sugar, of course, is made in Fiji. Flour, as I mentioned, comes from overseas. Made here, but the wheat comes from overseas. Most of the rice you eat comes from overseas. Most of the canned fish you eat comes from overseas. Cooking oil, all 100% overseas. Potatoes, all 100% overseas. Onions, all from overseas. Garlic from overseas. Baby milk from overseas. Powdered milk from overseas. They only bring in bulk in different packages. They have Red Cow, Rewa Dairy and all that. But all come from overseas. Liquid milk, most of it is from overseas. Dal, overseas. Tea, overseas. Salt, overseas. Soap, most of it is overseas. Some is made here, but with some raw ingredients are imported. Soap powder, overseas. Toilet paper, some may be made here. Sanitary pads for women, all overseas. Toothpaste, mainly overseas. Kerosene, overseas. Cooking gas, overseas. All of those things you require to run a home. You can see how much of that is made in Fiji. All those things. Everything that you all of you are wearing clothes. None of the fabric comes from Fiji. The polo shirt may be sewn in Fiji, but the fabric comes from overseas. The buttons you use comes from overseas. The thread in the shirts comes from overseas. The tiles that I'm walking on, overseas. Fan, all of this overseas. All the cars overseas. Everything's from overseas. You have to understand how dependent we are on imports and how important it is there for us to actually have foreign currency. Of course, if these things weren't zero-rated VAT now, you'd be all paying 9% more for all of these things. So what has government supported? We've supported the exchange control stability. I mean, I don't think many people appreciate the fact that in fact if we had not managed it the way it was, the Fijian dollar would have been devalued. If the Fijian dollar had been devalued, you'd be paying far more than what you're paying for these things now. Because the dollar would have diminished the value, it would have cost you more to buy things in foreign currency. Despite the 50% decline in government revenue, we supported $500 million in livelihood support. All the banks are still buoyant. There's liquidity in the banks. None of the banks have closed down. In fact, some banks have made large amounts of profit. So there's financial stability. We've done a number of things. There's no more ECAL now. There's no more, STT. No more requirement to have a business license. Unless you're selling food, you need the health inspectors to come and check it. No more stamp duties in Fiji. Departure tax has gone from $200 to $100. We have deferment of tax payments for about 18, for those who have tax liability. FNPF rates have come down. We had a $200 million available for working capital. The first 2 years, if you got the loan, we paid the interest rate on your behalf. And you only started paying in the third year. A lot of people in Fiji are talking about debt. Oh, but bhari karza, salibunandi now, without actually understanding debt. I mean, the two things that you should ask when somebody talks to you about debt is that, what are you borrowing the money for? And what is the cost of the money that you're borrowing? Right, so if this gentleman here wants to start a business, and wants to go and borrow $100,000, or has a business, existing business, wants to borrow $100,000, he goes to BSP. BSP says, no problem, I'll give you $100,000. 15% interest rate, pays back in 3 years. Magi goes and borrows $100,000 to continue with the business. He goes to HFC. They say, no problem, give you $100,000. 1% interest rate, pays back in 30 years. On the face of it, both of them have $100,000 debt. You said, oh, both of them have $100,000 debt. But they're worlds apart. He's going to have to work really hard, probably get high blood pressure, because he has every month to make enough money to do the repayments. If he doesn't, they might seize his business. He has to pay back in 3 years' time. Mark is in relax mode. 1% interest rate, 30 years to pay, not much effect on a cash flow. We have borrowed money from the Japanese at 0.01%. 0.01%, 40 years to pay, 10-year grace period. The World Bank has lent us money at 0% interest rate with a service fee of 0.75%. By the time we pay back the Japanese loan, we will only pay back 40% of what we borrowed. Because over a long period of time, that money and the interest rate being so low, the dollar value of course decreases. You only pay back 40% of what you borrowed. The World Bank one will pay back about 45% of what we borrowed. So that's one thing you got to understand. The first reason is that if you're going to borrow money, if government decides to build over here in Nakasi somewhere, one big convention center, cost us $25 million, and we borrow money to build a convention center, it gets used 5 times in a year, that's stupid use of money. That's a stupid reason why you borrowed money. But if you're going to borrow money to build a jetty, to connect people to electricity, to tar seal roads, connect people to water, pay unemployment benefit for people who may fall into abject poverty, that's good use of debt. It's a good reason to borrow. So there are the two things you must think about when you talk about debt. New Zealand had a debt to GDP ratio of only 28% before the pandemic. Now it's 52%, almost double. Australia 42 went up to 62. Malaysia 56 to 71. Fiji, of course, was at 46, even though we had 14 cyclones since 2016. It went up to 80%. Look at all the other countries, their debt to GDP ratio. USA was already high, it's sitting at 107%, went up to 133%. Japan, 257, 233 to 257. Nobody in Fiji says that these countries are in trouble. Only the so-called experts now in Fiji saying that Fiji is in trouble. Because it's a political analysis of it. When you talk about the economy, when you do the budget, it's not a political analysis. We have to look at the macroeconomic big picture. We have to look at the financial commitments. We have to look at our financial injection into the economy to make sure the economy continues to move. We create jobs, we create sustained livelihoods. And you make, whenever you deliver a budget, it's not only about the now, not only about today or this one coming year, it's also about 5, 10, 15 years' time. Because budgets are about the future. It may not only be, there may be, sorry I should say, maybe some immediate issues. Like inflation is an immediate issue. We're told by the shipping companies that we expect the freight cost to come down by September, October of this year. More containers are made available, etc. So, when you do a budget, we also think about what we want to do in 5, 10 years' time. Where do we want Fiji to be? So you can see the debt to GDP ratio, obviously, is, we're not anything exceptional in respect of being worse off than any other country. This is what I was talking about earlier on. In Fiji there's a mentality that if we need to give something in Suva, we have to take it from the people in Ba. Because there's an assumption that the pie will always remain one size. If you want to give him something, you have to take it from him. If you want to give something to him, you have to take it from him. But we want to grow the pie. Our GDP was growing over here. How do you know that? Because even though your dollar value of your debt was increasing, your debt to GDP ratio is coming down. So over here, your $3.6 billion loan, debt to GDP ratio is 51.6. Over here, your debt value was 4.6 billion, but debt to GDP ratio is 43.5. It reduced. Why? Because the economy grew. a lot more money in the system, a lot more prosperity, a lot more people having jobs. We had a 20-year low of unemployment, more cars on the roads, etc. Those are the kind of things that was happening. Let's look at the dollar value of the debt. You know how I talked about two people there? $100,000 was the dollar value of the debt. This is in US dollars. Internationally, when they measure debt, they look at it in US dollars. This is $1 billion. How many $1 billion here? Bahamas, tourism country in the Caribbean like us, the total debt value is 11.4 billion US dollars, which is about 22 billion Fijian dollars. Mauritius, again, 11.2 billion. Barbados, another tourism country, 6.6 billion US. Maldives, again, 6.3 billion. Fiji is about 3.7 billion US dollars, which is about, 8 billion Fijian dollars. And these are all the other tourism-based countries. I mean, some of these countries are very small. In terms of population, they are much smaller than us. But their debt levels are quite high compared to us. Let's look at the big boys and girls. This is in trillion dollars, not billion, trillion. That's the next one up from billion. US's debt is $30.5 trillion. Not billion, but trillion. It's the most debt-ridden country in the world. Japan's debt is $13 trillion. China, 12.8 trillion. United Kingdom, 3 trillion. India is 2.8 trillion. Australia is 1 trillion. US dollars. That's the dollar value of the debt. Nobody in this room, every single person over here will say, oh, I think Australia is okay. Japan is okay. US is okay. Because you see those countries is okay. Fiji has 3.7 billion and everybody starts jumping up and down. Well, not everybody, some people start jumping up and down without actually understanding debt. These are the foreign reserves I talked to you about. We have about 4.7 months worth of trading here in 2010. Total value of our foreign reserves is 1.3 billion. This is what I talked to you about, how many months of trading you can do. So with $1.3 billion worth, you could do 4.7 months worth of trading. Now you see over here, even though you had 2 billion, you could trade for only 4.5 months. Why? Because the economy was really growing at that point in time. When the economy is growing, a lot of people are doing construction, a lot of warehouses are being built, houses are being built. People demand more things from overseas. You need to use more foreign reserves. The people are buying cars, and boats and ships, tractors, a lot of housing, construction going on because most of the hardware is all imported, most of it. You need more foreign reserves. So at the moment we have $3 billion worth of foreign reserves and we're sitting at about 8.4 months of foreign reserve, of 8.4 months worth of trading. There's a good space. You saw earlier on about that video, problem with Sri Lanka is they didn't have enough foreign reserves to even buy fuel and medicine, cooking gas. They could not trade with other countries. We talked about liquidity. Liquidity basically means how much money there is within the banks. Remember, banks make money from money. Banks don't like to see money in their bank account. Banks like to see how much money they've lent. They make money from interest. That's where they make money from. So Westpac does not go and say, oh, I got $1 billion. They'll see how much money have I lent. That's their profit. Of course, they want to lend to people who know they'll pay them back. They lend all their money to people who won't pay them back, then they're in trouble. So normally there's a correlation between the amount of money in the banking system and the interest rate. If there's lots of money in the banking system, the interest rate will come down. Why? Because the banks will want to make the money more attractive. If you go to him and he's a businessman, the banks will say, I'll lend you at 12%, he says, no, thank you very much. If you go to him after 6 months and say, I'll lend you at 5%, he may consider it. Basically, that's how the system works. If you see over here, the liquidity in 2010 was only $348 million. Interest rate was 7.4%. We have $2.1 billion in the banking system. The interest rate is 5%. 5.6%. We think that this should be even lower because there's a bit more money there. And we hope that more banks actually will bring down the price. I know some companies are paying far less than 5.6. Some companies are paying 3.8% interest rate. When there's lots of money in the banking system, it's not being used. If he goes and wants to do a term deposit, they're probably giving only 1% interest rate. They don't want his money, really. Because the banks make money from your term deposit. If they pay you 1%, they'll take that same money and lend to somebody for 7%. But if there's a lot more money already and the interest rate is 5%, they won't necessarily want it. They'll give him even a lower rate for term deposit. So, where to from here? There are two things that we worry about when doing the budget at this point in time. One that we constantly have been worrying about is climate change. We don't know what the next cyclone season is going to bring for us. Only God knows. We don't know whether there will be 3 cyclones, 5 cyclones, what damage it will cause, whether it's going to, wash away the highway between Ba and Tavua. How many houses will it blow away? How many government stations, nursing stations, hospitals will get damaged? We don't know that. And you can't really budget for it. You can make some allocation. We like insurance, we're trying to get what we call parametric insurance. So at least we have some cover. But it's very hard to get cover for cyclones, as you know. So sometimes, for example, if we say we'll be putting footpaths from the main road, all the way up the street. And we'll put new street lights. If it's going to be like $3 million cost, if there's a cyclone and the highway between Nasori and Korovo gets washed away, we'll take this money we had earmarked for this and fix up the road. That's more important. You already have a road. Those people's road has gone. So we reprioritize budget. That's what we do. So that's why we don't like cyclones. Cost money, you don't know how to budget for it all the time, and sometimes, for example, various projects gets put on hold. Cyclone Winston cost us $500 million in rebuild. Schools alone, we had to spend in excess of $200 million just on schools. Now, most of the schools in Fiji are not owned by government. In fact, all of it is not owned by government except for about 10 or 12 schools. QVS, RKS, the other one, ACS, Lambasa College, Natambua. So these schools, there's a few others that government owns directly. All the other schools are owned by Sanatan Dharam, Methodist Church, Catholic Church, Muslim League, Seventh Day, whoever else. But when there's a cyclone, who builds the schools? We build the schools. People expect us to build the schools. Teachers' quarters gone blown away, we have to build it. We spend over $200 million doing that. Roads, bridges, jetties. In this cyclone season that's gone past, there's only one cyclone, Kodi. But it rained so much that the highway between Singatoka and Nandi, in Kambisi, the entire highway went, big hole in the ground. Nawai, one lane went. Semo, one lane went. In Ba, landslides, roads washed away. Culverts washed away. Irish crossings washed away. Just because of the rain. No cyclone. 2 years ago, the amount of rainfall that Vanua Levu had overall in Fiji the amount of rainfall we had was the same amount in 24 hours, the amount of rainfall we had 24 hours, the same amount of rainfall London gets in 1 year. London is a rainy place. The amount of rainfall London gets in 1 year, we got in 24 hours. So you can imagine the impact of what it is doing to us. So when we do the budget, that's something that we have to always take into consideration, something that we don't have much control over. The other one, of course, at the moment is the Russia-Ukraine war. It'd be great news if next week they stop. The price of wheat will come down. the price of fuel will come down. We start trading again. Enormous impact, positive impact. But it looks like it might stay that way or might spread to other countries. God forbid. If it does, we have a bit of a situation. So that's why we need strong and stable economic policies. We need the management of the economy. It's not a joke. In particular, when you have so much instability globally. People need to understand that. So we have to, everyone's interest to protect the fragile recovery we've got. We have to make sure that there is macroeconomic stability. You know, the taxes, all the technology in place. Everybody that received $50, the first, the $90, the 2 rounds of 50, the 360, nobody had to go and stand outside the DO's office or the Turangani Koro's house or the district advisory councillor's house or go and line up outside Ministry of Women, Children, Poverty Alleviation or some other ministry. You applied for it on your phone. On your phone, from the comfort of your house, and you got paid on the phone. No lining up, no queuing up. People need to understand, it's the first time this ever happened in Fiji. Before, you have to all go and line up. Even when we did Help for Homes in 2016, long queues, Lawanga Park, full of people. Syria Park, Dongambao Park, everywhere is full of people. In the hot sun, that people complain, I'm standing here for 4 hours, nobody's seen me. But all of that changed. So those are some of course, it's because of the fact that government has invested a lot in technology also, and also telecommunications. There are also some, new areas of the economy that we are trying to diversify into. One sector that grew jobs during COVID was the business processing outsourcing, what is called the BPO sector. Essentially now, Fijians sitting in Suva mainly, and in Nandi also, are processing insurance claims for people in Australia. When somebody makes a phone call to inquire, make an inquiry with their bank, if I'm living in Sydney, I ring up my branch, the person answering the phone is some Fijian sitting here. Good morning, sir, how can I help you? They think that you're actually in Australia, but they check the call is here. That's outsourcing. We're encouraging that. We've also given about $250,000 or $200,000 in this year's revised budget to the BPO Council to encourage them to get more businesses. I had a meeting last year with the Australian businesses who have their outsourcing in Philippines, trying to get them to move their business from Philippines to Fiji. For them, Fiji is closer. It's more attractive for them. We've got very good tax rates. If somebody invests in the BPO sector, we give them a 20-year tax holiday. Because when they come, we get more foreign exchange, they create jobs. The Australians are also partnering with us in that respect in supporting BPO. One of their consultants has said that there's about 100,000 jobs that can be created in the next 10 years in the BPO sector. The age range of people who work in the BPO sector is between the age of 19 and 33. We have a young population. 70% of the population in Fiji is below the age of 40. 65% is below the age of 35. Young population. A lot more babies to come. Young people make babies. It's a fact. It's a biological fact. So when we make policies, we have to ensure that we cater for this demographic change. A country like Japan, majority of the people are old. You have a 70-year-old pushing a trolley at the supermarket, packing your bags, your groceries for you. You don't have a 70-year-old person doing that in Fiji. So the way that government allocates funding is different to the way we will allocate funding. The way that they plan for the future is different to what we would plan for the future. So that's what is involved in budget. It's not only up to living up till here, not only up till the next budget or till the next election or whatever it is. It's about the future. That's how you get macroeconomic stability. So, all of this we're doing, trying to simplify things. A lot of processes are actually, still a lot of bureaucracy, which we're trying to get rid of. A lot of laws need to be changed. One interesting area is that if you look at agriculture sector last year, even though we had COVID, it grew quite significantly. It was the highest rate of exports in the agriculture sector minus sugar. You know, kava or yangona was very high. Ginger and turmeric, you know, haldi. Fijian ginger and Fijian turmeric is very highly sought after. A lot of people in Fiji don't even know that haldi is, you know, good for you. You'll put in milk and drink it. Fix up your joints. Your blood vessels become a lot smoother so the blood can flow quickly so you don't get a heart attack, hopefully. That's what turmeric is for. The huge demand for it. After COVID, everybody's becoming health conscious. Things like sajan, moringa, they call it moringa. It's also a superfood. Now people make powder out of it. If you go to every cane farm before in the Western Division, it always had a sajan tree. Because people knew it, you know, had all these benefits in it. So we've seen huge growth in these areas, and obviously we've been growing that, trying to focus more on that. A lot of issues regarding this, also the skill sets. The waiting time at a public hospital in Melbourne 2 weeks ago was 24 hours. If you went to a public hospital, you had to wait for 24 hours before a doctor or nurse would see you. There's a shortage of nurses. Advertisement in the papers over here, some employment agency was looking for chefs into Australia. 3 years or more experience, offering 80 to 120,000 Australian dollars. There's a shortage of fruit pickers in Australia. Shortage of people working in aged care services. There's a shortage of accountants actually in Australia. Somebody's telling one of the accountants that 60 accountants have left this year from Fiji. Fijian accountants have left for Australia. Recently they took a number of teachers who could teach in math, science and physics. A lot of Australian teachers don't want to go to rural areas and teach. New Zealand, there was an article just last week that they require 60,000 people to work in the hospitality sector. A lot of people don't want to work as waiters and waitresses anymore. Or go and, you know, make the bed in the hotel. Because a lot of them, you know, have moved along since after COVID, it was shut down. New Zealand, a very hard lockdown. So they're short. Some of the restaurants aren't opening full day. There's not enough people to do the work. So, they may take our people. Some people have already gone. If they take all our chefs, who's going to cook food for us in our hotels? We're trying to get tourists to come to Fiji, right? We need good chefs too. When there's a Christchurch earthquake, after that they had the rebuild in Christchurch. A lot of our bricklayers and plaster men and women and tile layers, all of that, they went to Christchurch. They got short-term visas. Now they got permanent residency. So then we had a shortage of people here. So we have to also, in the budget, we have to look at how FNU can partner with us. We train more of our people. We have to look at perhaps even getting more people from overseas. There are already construction companies getting people from Bangladesh. Not enough tile layers, bricklayers, all of those things. People are changing their priority. The average age of a cane farmer today is 59 years. Young men don't want to go and work, and women don't necessarily want to go and work in the farm. Today somebody at the Nasori submission said, you know, we need to get more people into farming and change the attitude towards agriculture. I completely agree. I reminded him, when we were in school, I remember, if anybody in school did not study well, the teacher would say, hey, you want to be a farmer? In other words, if you don't study, you'll end up being a farmer. So farming was actually looked down upon. It was not seen as a profession, as a job that you could do. But yet farming is very important. Of course there are other issues. In Fiji before, for government land or crown land or Itoke land, if you took out a lease for tourism, residential, commercial, industrial, you can get leases up to 99 years. For agriculture, only 30 years. That's why commercial banks did not lend for farming. That's why we don't have large-scale commercial farms in Fiji. That's why we don't have large machineries in the farming sector. Why? Because leases were only 30 years. Now the law has been amended. It can go up to 99 years. Some of these people who actually give out these leases still have that frame of mind. Some people in TLTB, some people in the lands department. So we need to change that way of thinking. We saw how important food is, food supply is, food security is. But if we want large-scale investment in farming, we need longer leases. We need people to be able to access finance, to be able to invest in their farms. So those are some of the changes that we're bringing about, of course. And technology, and changing the laws, etc. Minimum wage rate, of course, as you know, has gone up to $4. It becomes fully implemented by January of next year. Every quarter it increases towards $4. And that, of course, helps meet some of the costs. The other wage sectors also have to increase proportionally. We will continue to invest in education. As you know, during COVID, even though our government revenue halved by 50%, education was still free. Early childhood, all the way up to year 13. We still had TELs, we still had toppers. We spend $700 million a year in education sector. All the teachers' salaries, irrespective of which school they teach at, unless of course it's a fully private school like international school or something, we pay all the teachers' salaries. We give them school grants, over $200 per child to the school. So we'll continue with that. We want to do connectivity. Over here everybody's sitting on the phone, a lady is there, instantly she's sending out what I'm saying is being sent to her media company. There are people in Fiji who don't have internet. We recently spent about $1.4 million in the Northern Division to connect schools to internet, connect health centers to internet. The teachers in those schools, like during the COVID lockdown here, a lot of the schools over here, they had the worksheets. The teachers could print it and give it out to the students or the parents, or parents could print it. Those schools, some of the teachers had to travel 10 kilometers to get connection to internet. A lot of the schools we've now connected to them. We give them PCs, we give them webcams, we give them IP phones. If there's a village nearby, if there's people living nearby the school, we Wi-Fi the school compound. So the people could come into the school compound to connect to Viber or WhatsApp or whatever it is. So those are some of the things that we have to continue. Whilst 95% of Fijians have access to connectivity, the other 5% don't. So we'll be spending a lot of money in that respect. See, when somebody says, we don't have Vodafone connectivity or Digicel, if you have a remote village on some island, to maybe get the signal, they need to put up a tower that will cost $1 million or $500,000, say, just on the cheap side. But there may be only 50 people living in that village. They spend $10 a month, that's $500. So the phone company will say, hang on, $500 a month, multiply by 12, that's $6,000 a year. And I have to invest $500,000 to connect them. I'm not going to do it. Because you divide $500,000 by 6,000 is how many years it'll take to pay back just for that cost. So we charge them a levy, money goes into the trust fund, we put our money, then we put up a tower. So before the way it was done, we gave it only one mobile phone company. Now we're saying we build a tower strong enough to ensure that we can put both the phone's transmitters on it, phone company's transmitters on it. You of course have to build the towers to very good strength. You don't want the tower falling down because of a cyclone. That's the kind of connectivity that I'm talking about, that we want to continue, of course, with that. Public utilities. You would have seen Water Authority of Fiji. We're spending close to $300 million for the Viria water project. I know people living in this area, in the Suvarnasori corridor, have water issues. There's so many people who have moved into this area, but investments have not been made for a number of decades into the piping system. You go and look at some of the pipes that have been put in, they're 50, 60 years old. Nobody did any maintenance program on that. So now when the land leases weren't renewed in Vanuatu, 50% of cane production went down. All the Lambasa people are living here now. That's why there's a football match, all the Lambasa flags are there. They're here. So there's a lot of pressure on the system. So we're spending $300 million in the Viria. If you go down to the back road, near ACS and all those places, you'll see all the water pipes are being laid. It's costing about $300 million. It produces about 40 million liters of water on a daily basis. And that will be enough to feed everybody 24/7 water. So So those are some of the things that we have to continue to invest in. It's very important. I just wanted to show you very quickly. So, sorry, you can get all the information I just mentioned on this website here. This is the amount of money you spend. So, you know, I talked to you about FNPF. So those people who were employed formally, if I work for a company, the company paid for my FNPF, and then if I lost my job, then you could take out your money from your general account on a fortnightly basis. But if there's no money in your general account, we pay $225 a fortnight, we paid $205 million. Assisted about 68,864 people. Then the first round of $90. We started that off. We said $90 per household. Then people started chortling from the system. 5 people in one home, they all applied. Supposed to be $90 per household. So we caught on to it really quickly. Then we said, okay, we'll pay $50 per person. That's why it went down to 50 per person. So you have 5 people in one home, they could all apply $50 each. We paid out the first round, 11.2 million. Second round, 10.2 million. Then the famous 360. You know, literally, our vaccination rate was here. When we announced the 360 to get vaccinated, the vaccination rate went up. It's a fact. You should see the vaccination graph. So money incentivized people to get vaccinated. Actually, that's what happened. Assuming we gave the 360 without having that requirement for vaccination, these people would not have made an effort to go and get vaccinated. Our vaccination rate would have been lower. We would not have been able to open up the borders. Assuming we said no jab, no job policy was not in place, a lot of people would not have got vaccinated. See, vaccination is not only about keeping yourself safe, your family safe, your community safe, your town safe, your country safe. It's about how other people will view you. When an Australian is sitting in Sydney deciding to have a holiday, now they look at first up how much, what's the rate of vaccination in that country. If that country is a low rate of vaccination, I'm not going there. You will do the same too. If tomorrow I tell you to go and have a holiday in some country where the vaccination rate is very low, you won't have a holiday there. Then I might get it. It's precisely what we had planned. I know some of these people, they criticize us for that, but we stuck to it. Because we knew that was the only way out of it. So it is very interesting. I should have brought the graph, because if you see the graph, before 360 it was here, then it went up. People used to phone up, where will I get the next one? So I can get the 360. I met somebody 2 weeks ago, he said, I want to get the booster, you going to give me 360 or not? We had a raffle for vaccination. People went and got themselves vaccinated to participate in the raffle. So we paid 360, first round, $106 million. 294,924 people. Now, we could have paid all this money in one day, but we didn't. Because we knew if you paid it all in one day, everybody would be at Vodafone and Digicel. So we paid it over 1 week. So we had people phoning us, oh, my neighbor's got it, I haven't got it. I applied before her, but you know, she's got it before me. Yeah, you'll come. But we spread it. And then recently, all of this, from 1 to 5, was only for Viti Levu. Because Viti Levu was the hardest hit. This FNPF was for all over the country. So if I worked in a hotel in Lau or Kandavu or Yasawa or Rotuma, wherever, if I lost my job, we paid that out through FNPF. Round 1, the 90, the 2 rounds 50, 2 rounds of 360 was only for Viti Levu. And then of course we had Vano Levu assistance, $2 million recently that we paid out. The other thing I want to also mention is about education. As I mentioned, we spent $700 million overall. Can anybody guess how much we pay civil servants their salary in 1 year? What's the salary bill? George? 250 million? No. It's higher. Sorry? Who said that? Well, it's 1.1 billion. That's our wages bill. $1.1 billion. Everybody that works in all the government agencies, including police and everywhere, $1.1 billion we pay. Our total expenditure is slightly over 3 billion. So nearly 1/3 of our expenditure is paying for wages. Then of course we came in a car, we have to pay for the fuel. We have to pay for other things. Photocopying paper, toilet paper, traveling, all those sorts of things. And then capital expenditure. That's how basically we spend money. And we give, social welfare benefit. We pay about 110 million in social welfare benefit a year. About 84,000 recipients. And then of course, other benefits we do pay out. So for education, this year, we've got 156.5 million only for TELs and toppers. And just to clarify, toppers is when we pay for you and you don't have to pay us back ever. So toppers essentially, in certain areas of study, we see as priority. So shortage of nurses. So if you get a topper in nursing, you go, we pay for your accommodation, we pay for your university fees, we pay for your books, we pay for your living expenses, you become a nurse. Or we give you toppers, you'll be a doctor, or engineer, or marine scientist, or forester, or town planner, or surveyor. Not town planning is not done in Fiji, but say land surveyor. All you have to do is you have to work in Fiji for a number of years, depending on how much money we spent on you. For if we've given you a topper scholarship to do health or become a doctor, MBBS, you have to work in Fiji for 8 years. You don't have to work for government, you can work in the private sector. You can work for a private hospital. As long as you work in Fiji, because Fijian money has been used to educate you, you have to pay back. If you want to leave, need to migrate permanently, whatever, we've had a few cases where people have said, I'm getting married to somebody from overseas. I'm going to go and work in Canada, or Australia, or New Zealand. Yeah, you can go. Just pay the balance of the money. It's not fair. In the beginning, when we had TELs, a few people went. We did not have any guarantors in place at that time. They went overseas, we were going for holiday. Little did we know they're never going to come back. We lost over $1 million that way. As I mentioned to you earlier on, we have a young population. We're going to get more babies. We can't only think about today. If you're going to make something free today, you have to make sure it's going to be free for those young people coming into the future too. It has to be sustainable. With TELs, you actually have to, we pay for your accommodation if you want that. Some people get TELs, but they live at their home. They only want the university fees paid. They want the textbooks, but they don't want living allowance. Some of them have to move towns, they need living allowance. Living allowance is now in excess of $6,000 a year. So you have to pay back, that's a loan. Interest rate is 0.5%, it goes up to 1.5% depending on the income of the family. You only start paying that loan once you get a job. And it's a small percent of what gets deducted. If you pay 50% of what you borrowed in 3 years, we forgive the other 50%. That's how easy it is. So now some financial institutions are talking to us and saying, look, we think it's a good thing. We want to help these kids out. So we can actually pay off the loan, 50% of the loan for us. They'll owe us the other 50%. And they can have a 5-year term, 10-year term, whatever it is, depending on the job. It's a good system. It's a win-win situation for everybody. So, I just wanted to highlight that. There's a lot of misinformation. We're actually giving a lot of in Tibet courses, certificate 3, 4, diploma levels at FNU, carpentry, plumbing, at the maritime school, all those areas that we want to provide a lot more funding for in the Tibet courses. So, ladies and gentlemen, Thank you very much for your presence here. I'll open up the floor. As I said, if you've got any personal issues that you want to, highlight, you've got staff at the back, you can leave your name, number, and tell them what the problem is. They make a note of it. We've helped solve a lot of problems in the past couple of weeks or so for a lot of people. We can obviously continue to do that. If you want to ask questions, we had a question, for example, in Nosori by this lady today. She's saying that FRA gets too much money. The road conditions aren't good. Why can't we take the money away from FRA and give it somewhere else? So I explained things to her. Some person talked to us about agriculture. They said one of the problems with agriculture is we don't get access to machinery. What can we do? There was a submission, which is actually something that we've been also talking about. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions. Nothing is too silly or too hard to ask. And let's try and keep it as informal as possible. Thank you. Somebody going around with the mic. Please put up your hand.
Honorable Minister, thank you so much for the presentation today. It was very informative. I represent the Fiji Building Designers Association, and together with me are my fellow executives. My question is, not actually a question, but we actually seek assistance from government in terms of proper legislation for our association, and we're in the business of providing architectural services. We assume that we represent close to 80% of the building applications that actually go to municipal councils, because if you look at the ratio, at the moment we are about 100 in membership that are officially registered with us, but we also assume that there is about 200 or so that are not registered with us. On the contrary, the Fiji Architects Association currently has about 17 or 19 practicing members, and I think you mentioned that our population at the moment stands at 895,000. That ratio there's a big gap in that ratio, because surely 17 architects cannot provide for a population of 895,000, and that's where we feel that we are a key stakeholder in the industry, in the building industry, and we provide architectural and project management services as such. My request to government is if we could assist with proper legislations and maybe a Designers Act for us.
Do you have any draft legislation, or what other countries have done?
We are very closely affiliated with the Building Designers Association of Australia, BDAA, and we're seeking assistance from them in terms of perhaps at some stage adopting what they have in place, the framework that they have in place.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. We've had those kind of discussions previously, and I agree with most of the things that you're saying. But it does help if you have a draft, if you have a law that's worked somewhere else really well. They've got best international practices, and then it's easy to sort of put that out to the public, get people's feedback on it. And then you can move from there. But I know what you're saying, and I know exactly, the dynamics at play. But thanks for that. If you can leave your name and contact details with the staff at the back, please. The gentleman over here in the black cap. Is that an All Blacks cap?
Waiting for this my views to be heard, but I was driving down, then I heard that you are around here. It's just a few requests that I want to bring to you, sir. One, it is so interesting and encouraging to see that road victims and school victims are compensated for injury and death, which is pretty good, and I appreciate that. But I request if that can be extended, because Fiji First policy is inclusiveness. If it could be extended to fishermen, beach dimmers, and fire victims. At times we have seen that those are the sole breadwinners of the family. And a fisherman goes out fishing, he is lost at sea, the family is basically left with nothing to continue life. So that's a request I'm making, and on the same token, you should know better on this, on banks. When we visit banks, the queue, leave alone the sitting seats there, which is very limited. And there are at times senior citizens who wait on the long queues. I request if there could be some restrooms available, so we can go and visit the restrooms and come back in the lines. So those small things could be attended to. We have also spoken, sir, on farmers. As a farmer in an agriculture office, I feel if we get the small things correct, the bigger picture will fall in place. What I mean, when we listen to the weather forecast, it may not be too important for a man working in the bank, and they announce rain, and it doesn't rain, or they announce cloudy rain. For a farmer, we have to be, the announcements that are made on the radio, weather reports, it has to be pretty specified. In Kailevu or in Rewa, at least we expect 20 millimeters of water or rain, and accordingly farmers can plan. So those areas can be improved, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first issue you raised was the school, the injuries or the deaths. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many of you know how ACCF works, Accident Compensation Commission of Fiji. Now, this started off, as you know, before, if you, for example, had a road accident and the person needed to be compensated, you had to go through a normal court process. There was a requirement that all motor vehicles needed to have third-party insurance, to pay third-party insurance. And then, for example, if my family member died on the road because of a car accident, in order for him or her to get compensation, you have to take the person to the court, the person who caused the accident. And then normally, the insurance company, which they had to pay out, they would defend that person. So I would have to go and hire a lawyer. And then you have a court case, can go for 3, 4 years, 5 years. Sometimes my relative who had the accident might die by that stage, so nothing happens. So it became essentially what we call litigation in the courts, which we removed all that. Now, for example, if somebody dies as a result of a car accident, you don't have to go, you don't hire lawyers, you simply go to ACCF, you fill out the form. A lot of people actually have been paid within a week. How is ACCF funded? There was a particular levy charged to all road users, and that funding actually went to a trust fund, and you keep the funds and you pay out from there. If you get injured, or if you lost a limb, there's a price for everything. If I lost an arm, my right arm, and that's my working arm, I would get a higher price for that as opposed to the left arm. The similar system is in New Zealand. In fact, a lot of legislation we have now, we borrowed from New Zealand. That's how ACCF works. We then extended that to schoolyard injuries and also workers' compensation. Before, for example, if I was a worker and I had to go and work on a machine, and my employer paid workers' compensation, assuming I'm working the machine and I cut off my thumb by accident, the insurance company would come and defend the employer, and it had what you call a fault system. In other words, I could say, hey, this guy cut his thumb off because he came grog doped. He contributed to the accident. Now for workers' compensation, for the road accident, is what you call a no-fault system. We don't have to assign fault. A lot of the times children who've died on the road, they run in front of the bus. Right? The bus is parked there, I'm driving, and the kid runs in front of the bus. Gets hit, dies. Before it was, it's his fault, the kid's fault, therefore you're not going to pay. You'd go on to the courts for 5, 6, 7 years. A lot of times before, some lawyers would take 50% of whatever you get paid out. We put a restriction on that also. You cannot pay any more than a particular percentage. So we extended that obviously to workers' compensation, also schoolyard injuries, what do you call schoolyard injuries? A lot of kids are walking around with pencils, poke his eye, he's lost his eye, we've had that. So there's a compensation paid to the child. Nobody contributes towards the funding of that. It all comes from that particular trust fund. So we first introduced the road accident, then employment, then schoolyard injuries. It can get extended to other areas. We've been talking about sports injuries also, high school. I remember a long time ago when I was in Marist, our 15th team, we were playing Super Grammar. One of the guys, he went into the scrum, he never got up because somebody snapped his neck. He was paralyzed from that day onwards. I still remember his name. Now, those things can happen. We want them to get compensation also. But we wanted these three things to work first well. You need to have funding too. You can't expend it too fast. Otherwise the money could also dry up. You need to have a source of funding for it. It has to be sustainable. You're saying about the fishermen? I mean, a lot of these people are, they're not working for anybody, self-employed. I know what you're saying. When people die, there's no source of income. But I'm just trying to explain to you where we came from and how we can expend, but we have to make sure that whatever we expend into is done properly. In respect to the banks, I can't tell the banks to have a restroom. That's their own private premises. But hopefully, I think you're being told it's live streamed, so hopefully some bank manager is listening to you, and that they will, have those facilities available. We were in Nandi, I think it was last week before last, and somebody said to us that, look, when I go to board the minibus, everybody pushes and shoves. Can you tell them not to do that? I can't. It's an attitudinal thing. They should form a straight line. You know what I mean? Certain things that we can do, certain things we can't do. We can make laws, for example, regarding domestic violence. We can make sure that the police enforces all the domestic violence laws. We can make sure that there is no drop policy on domestic violence. But we can't be inside people's home to stop them from doing so. It's an attitudinal thing also. So we have to do a lot of education. We have to make the right laws in place, make sure the law is enforced properly. Okay, but thanks for raising those issues. There's a gentleman here first, please. Hot Ocean. It's your T-shirt. Over here, Hot Ocean, please.
Hello. I just want to highlight and ask a question because I have seen the budget, but we have mainly focused on the tourism side of it. But in the loan that is we have taken as foreign reserves, but we have not talked much on the refinancing of those loans, how this GDP will be grown into refinancing those loans. We have only got the feedback from you that it was through tourism only at the moment. But only thing, as we know, Fiji has got an agriculture sector, is a big agriculture sector, and refinancing of those loans could be done through agriculture. But we have not had any views on the number of leases being issued so far to farmers that have no new developments into agriculture where they can develop the economy, and also refinancing those loans that has been there on foreign reserves. Just make also a question, like you have also said that people have moved from Lambasa into maybe a sector in Suva and some places of the agriculture. I want to also highlight that few years in, like 5-6 years back, I have also highlighted an issue with you regards to a development that was taken in Navovo. And those 5 years we have been raised this issue with the government as a genuine victimized farmer, where our leases were already underway when the coup happened. And we raised this issue with the government. Until today, there has not been addressed to. And it took us about, now it's been like the second elections is almost coming. So since those are things that is happening, I believe that if these farmers are victimized like this, it will might take, I don't know when to, like contribute to the economic development in order to, but we are like to finance the GDP and, in contributing to the country. But then we are taking all the loans and we are relying on the tourism sector. I know there's a good earning from it, but we also need to focus on the leases that is issued and the farmers are looked after in country in order to contribute to the GDP. Thank you, sir.
I think you misunderstood what I said. We're not refinancing loans. Loans don't, you can refinance a loan by taking, refinance basically means I have this loan here. I'm going to pay off this loan by taking out another loan. We're not doing that. That's what refinance means. So you've got that wrong. You don't refinance GDP. GDP grows or decreases. So I don't know where you're coming from. I highlighted tourism. It's not only tourism. I said the economy is growing. The only reason why I highlighted tourism is because tourism contributes 40% towards the GDP. If you look at the allocation of the budget in the revised budget, the $63 million has been given to the agriculture sector. It's not a small amount of money. Right? So I really cannot understand the premise of your question. Because firstly, we're not refinancing loans. We did refinance expensive loans with cheaper loans. So for example, the Garase government had taken out bonds in 2006. If they went out to the international market, that's what a lot of countries do. They go out to the international market, they go to private investors and they raise bonds. 6% interest rate. And then normally bonds, what they do, they roll it over. So at the end of the 5 years, you have to pay the lump sum, bang. So because they can't pay it, then they'll go out again into the market and roll it over, which we did. And then we actually got financing from the World Bank and ADB at 2% interest rate and paid off that expensive loan, refinanced it with a cheaper loan. That's refinancing. So tourism does not contribute towards refinancing. Right? Tourism contributes 40% towards the GDP, and therefore we, I highlighted that to show how the economies come back up. Because tourism has a huge impact on the economy. Not just about people filling in hotels, but as I mentioned to you earlier on, those people who live on the tourism sector. Right? So there's some guy who's supplying something to the hotel. There's some person who supplies coconut for the tourists to drink. Or some person who supplies food to the person who works at the hotel. So it has what we call a multiply effect. But as I also highlighted to you on this slide, and I talked to you about agriculture. Yeah. Focus on areas of competitive advantage, price to value proposition. BPO, I highlighted that to you. Business processing outsourcing. Health tourism, sports, agriculture, value addition in agriculture and other niche areas. I had a meeting on Saturday night near Kuku, right, where a gentleman said to me that there's too much cassava now. I'm not getting the right price. Right. He raised it. He said, how can you help us? In fact, a week before that, somebody said to me, I'm not getting the right price for my dalo and cassava. Get AMA to buy it. I said, what's AMA going to do with it? He said, throw it all I care, I just want my money. So agriculture is running a business, right? It's also about knowing your market. And the other day I heard one politician saying, we'll solve the inflation problem by growing more cassava and more dalo. If everybody's going to grow cassava and dalo, how much will they get for it? Right, then the farmers will complain and say, I'm only getting 5 cents a kilo. Everybody's growing cassava. So, with the agriculture sector, it's not as simple as that. You have to get it right. I mean, if your main issue is about the lease, that's a separate issue. It's not about victimization. As you know that the promises that were made were different. I kind of remember somewhat of what you had said about it. But most certainly the presentation is not only about tourism. And it's not refinancing. It's about growing the GDP. It's also about diversification. We use this word continuously. Diversification. God willing, by next week, they'll start doing open heart surgeries in Lautoka Hospital. Now, people have asked the question and saying, why did you have the public-private partnership at Lautoka Hospital? Why not in Suba? The bulk of the people are in Suba. Well, have you seen where CWM is? There's no land. Lautoka has a bit more land. Part of the deal is they're going to build a new wing. In the new wing, they'll have what we call an operating learning theatre. There's not a single Fijian doctor that can carry out open heart surgery in Fiji. Not one. Not one. It's a tragedy. Because of the lack of investments in our doctors for the past number of decades. The salaries they got paid was pittance. A lot of good ones went. Today, the top heart surgeon is somebody from Lambasa who migrated many years ago. He's doing open heart surgery. He's the top surgeon in New Zealand. So the idea is to retain our people and pay them, reward them well. To make sure that when they're in the civil service, they don't get appointed because of their ethnicity or religion or what school they went to. or what province they came from. They get appointed on merit. That's why we talk about open merit recruitment system. People get appointed on their capacity and their capability, not of their socioeconomic status or communal affiliation. So the reason why we did do this in Lautoka, 4 reasons. Is firstly, there's a lot more land available. We can do a new wing, operating learning theatre. Our doctors can get trained. And then they can, do the surgeries themselves. Secondly, it's not that far away from Suva. At the moment, if you want to do open heart surgery, a lot of people go to India. Or they go, if they can afford it, they go to Australia and New Zealand. Then the big issue is, can the family afford to pay for them to go? Big issue. People go around collecting money. You don't have to collect money to go to Lautoka. That hospital, the PPP, the company that owns it is called Healthcare Fiji Limited, 80% owned by FNPF. Your organization. 20% owned by Aspen Medical. Aspen Medical is Australian certified hospital. Before the pandemic, the waiting queue line at public hospitals for elective surgery in Australia was 2 years. Elective surgery. Not emergency surgery, elective surgery. So if you have an Australian certified hospital, elective surgeries of there can be done here too, right? It creates jobs for us, or jobs for doctors and nurses. The third thing is that if you have procedures that are going to be available in Fiji, that's not available in other Pacific Island countries, they'll come to Fiji. So do they need to be? They need to be next to an international airport, Nadi. Right. Nobody in those Tuvalu, Kiribati and all those other countries do they do open heart surgery. They don't have chemotherapy available. Palliative care. So if those procedures are available in Fiji, they'll come to Fiji. When they come to Fiji, they use our hotels, they use our airline, they buy our food, we make money. The fourth thing is that there are a lot of Fijians at the moment, a lot of women in particular, a lot of them illegally, some legally, in the west coast of America, providing aged care services. They're looking after old people. Our people are well known for looking after young people and old people. It's a fact. You go to all the hotels, you'll see what they call kids club. The parents come from Australia, New Zealand, they go in suntan, they leave the kids with the nannies. By the time the holiday ends, the children want to stay with the nannies. So a lot of women from Fiji are actually working there. Some of them getting paid 150 US a day, accommodation, food, etc. If we can have what we call aged care services available in Fiji, we can build aged care services in Fiji, investment in Fiji. We have tax holidays now. If you invest in aged care services, you get 13-year tax holidays, etc. So instead of our people going there, they can stay here, and those Americans can come to Fiji. They'll buy probably an apartment. It's in the western side, close to the airport. Weather is much nicer there. Of course, Western people are much nicer too. Right? That's the big picture. That's what you call diversifying the economy. It's not only tourism dependent. We have at the moment highlighted the shortage of people in Australia to work in different areas. They're also taking some of our people to go and work in aged care services in Australia now. We'd rather that they bring them here. So that's what we're doing. I mean, in respect to the land issue, there's something that we can talk about later about that specific lease itself. Lady there, please.
Sorry, thank you. I have 2 issues. One issue is regarding the bus shelters in Nakasi. We have a lot of population here, as you can see, but we only have, we've been complaining about it for some time, and we have raised it several times, but we only have 1 bus shelter that's over there, and the rest are on the highway. And lots of children that go to school here, there's about 3 schools, they do not have, whenever they come down because the bus doesn't go inside many of the big streets that are here, so they have to go outside to the main Vishnudo Road, and they get wet. Elderly don't have places to sit. So perhaps if after the consultation, maybe if you take a across, you'll see that the number of households we have and no bus shelters. So I would really appreciate if bus shelters could be something that the government or Fiji Roads Authority could have a look into in the area of Nakasi. The other is the submission that I want to make on behalf, which 1,000 people have signed in support of, and this is in regards to supporting breastfeeding mothers and also babies. The initiative that it's for-profit initiative, but it's like a social thing, because one of the reasons why I opted for this particular method was because if you look at the healthcare system, after sometimes things go wrong and bad, and we have to keep sustaining it. So what I'm proposing here is that for the government to support establishment of a breastfeeding nursery, and this will be, I'm not sure if it exists in Fiji yet or not, but this probably might be one of the first ones where working mothers can come and breastfeed their babies during working hours. The key goal here is to support low and middle income earning mothers who are working. So the aim also is to address three social issues, three issues that are concerning this. One is to, after the inflation, IMF has predicted that by the end of 2022, the inflation could even rise even higher. And now more and more middle class and more low income earning families are dependent on dual income. So that means, before women could take care of children at home and males used to go and work out, but now they actually starting to realize that women play a very important role in the growth of economy. So there needs to be infrastructure in place to actually support that. The other one that I wish to raise is also that a lot of there's a mentality, that women motherhood guilt, where a lot of pressure goes on women to actually stay home and look after the babies, and so I think that if such a nursery is created, because we have a gap for infants between the ages of 0 and 2, and if such a nursery is created, mothers will not have to go far away, but they can just, during the work hours in a walking distance, go and breastfeed their babies. Also, there was a survey that was done by the International Finance Corporation in 2019, which found that 20% of the working mothers left their work after 20 months of their employment, out of 3 months of giving childbirth. So that's one of the issues that I'm trying to address here. The other one is the growing dependency on infant milk import. So when mothers go out to work, there is no one to take care of the babies, and so because they're not able to breastfeed, they are more and more becoming dependent on infant milk. And in countries like right now in UK and US, there is a shortage of infant milks, and so one of the things that the two supply of infant milk that currently after the VAT reduced price and price control, a 900 can of imported infant milk costs between $25.50 to $43.75, and that only lasts between 7 to 13 days if it's used frequently by. It's dependent on that. The other thing is that Nestle, which is the owner of SMA and Lictugan, which is the most milk, that is one of the two infant milks that are used in Fiji, they have increased their price across by 5.2% across all their products and foods, and they used it as an inflation as one of the reasons. And they have also said that in coming towards the end of the year, and based on the IMF's prediction, forecast, there could be a further increase. And so taking all that into consideration, I think that if the government could support a nursery where we could encourage not dependency so much on infant milk but on breastfeeding, and so yeah, we could actually solve the problem. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. Just in respect of the roads with the bus shelters, if you could just tell the staff which roads you're talking about so we can get FRA to have a look at those roads. We did announce about, in fact, there's a study being done, as you highlighted, about the need to have a much more conducive work environment, in particular where a lot of women work. There was a study that was being done. We've already made this announcement, I think, the last budget or the budget before that, about how government is currently thinking about creating spaces in workplaces, like garment factories, for example. If there was an area provided, with a lot more women work in the garment industry. There's some industries and some sectors with a lot more women work. If you go to PEFCO, the factory, 95% of the people who work there are women. And you're right, some women would rather feel a lot more comfortable having their child on the premises. They could do the breastfeeding and then somebody could look after the children on site. So we are exploring that. We made that announcement already. It's not necessarily something you just pull off overnight, because you have to make sure that the employers come on board with you. We have to create the physical space for it. At the same time, you need to be able to provide people who can look after the babies too. Because you can't have mothers, for example, doing the sewing, and then if the baby cries, they run off. So there needs to be people there. But the reason why they bring them is that, at the morning tea break or lunchtime, they can go in and attend to the babies. They can do the breastfeeding. So those are the things that we are looking at. Some of the, like FDB recently opened up their branch where they've actually done that. So their female staff can actually have a space. So they call safe spaces, they call it, where they can do this. So some employers have started doing that. But we are quite keen to do that too, because that actually is a very practical way of participation in terms of the workplace for females. The issue around milk, that feeds into that. Sometimes it's people's choices too. Some people can breastfeed, but you can't go and force them to do it. That's their own belief or life system or value system or how they physically want to do things. But the availability of spaces would most definitely help towards that. Okay? Thanks. Coach?
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for giving me this opportunity. First of all, I want to thank the Fiji government for allowing me to come back to Fiji after spending 27 years in Canada. I came into the shipping industry with my dad when I was 8 years old, and I still strive to be the best in this industry. And for the last 10 years, we've invested in about $20 million in shipping. But the problem that we face is the interpretation of the law in Fiji when it comes to shipping with custom bags and importing things. As you know, shipping is a challenging industry in Fiji. Before I came, there were fishing vessels converted into carrying passengers. So the standard was very low. In 10 years, we brought the standard where I never heard in the Pacific Island. Fiji has the best shipping industry in the Pacific Island so far. So, but to do that, there's a cost related to that. The biggest problem we face is the labor shortage. I employ about 350 employees. I'm short about 100 employees. And it's due to the industry of the school not providing the proper training that we get at school. Okay? And the cost of the parents for the students to go to school is the biggest issue now. It costs about $3,000. When I did my education here, way back in the 80s, it cost my dad only $67 for a term. It's costing the school, the students now is about $3,000 to finish that. The intake for the school is about 90 students in 1 year. But the pass out is about 10 students. Right? So that's a drawback, because people, it's all about money now for the school. It's not about training, right? So you train, they bring you from high school into school education schedule, right? Without learning the industry. Half of them drop out, but there's limited amount of ships here for them to work. So that's one of the drawbacks I face. Like today I lost about 7 employees to another shipping company. We train them, we cannot hold them back. For $10 they move away. Okay. So that's the biggest issue that I face with that. The other one is the franchise that the government assists us for the outer islands. I'll give you an example. Rotuma used to take 48 hours. Now we brought that down to 27 hours to 30 hours. The government assistance is only $25,000. Right? The fuel cost for me to go to Rotuma and back again is 32,000 liters. The cost is about $67,000, just Rotuma. The outer islands. The same rate goes to a smaller vessel. My fuel consumption is 400 liters to 500 liters an hour. Compared to the smaller vessels, their fuel consumption is about 97 liters an hour. They'll get the $25,000. They can go empty up to Rotuma and back again and still make money, right? To the domestic here, just the local islands here. To Northern Laos, it's $18,000. My fuel consumption is about 21,000 liters. Right? The cost is about 50 something thousand dollars. Right? The smaller ships again go empty 2 times to the Northern Laos and come back. They still make money. Right? So my thing, look at, they should be. The government needs to look at it. They should have 2 tiers in. They can use the benchmark as a horsepower. The horsepower that what burns the fuel. They can have 1,000 horsepower. 1,000 horsepower, you get this rate. Under 1,000 horsepower, you get this rate. Right? So there's a transparency in there. Also, when the franchise award, there's a lot of favoritism. Basically, it's Ghana shipping is trying to dominate it. I have a passion for this industry. It's not about money for me. Okay? I've been blessed by the Lord. I got a wife and 2 kids and a house in Canada. 27 years I worked hard. I came to Fiji because there was a need in Fiji because this is my industry that I really enjoy. But they look at Ghana shipping as, oh, you try to dictate shipping. No, I don't. I enjoy doing this now. It's my love for this industry. Okay? I thank the government for supporting me every time. Sometimes you see my text come to you 2 in the morning or what time, just to say I'm very frustrated. Just last week, I give you an example, just 2 days ago, I have a dry dock appointment with the local dock. It's in October. I've paid my fees, everything. And I asked the MSF, please give me a 3-month leeway so I can go up. They said, no, you have to spend $2,500 underwater survey, then I'll give you a 1-year extension. I said, listen, I don't need an extension. My ship's going up for dry dock. Okay. I had 2 funeral caskets on board in Natovi. The funeral was in Levuka at 1 o'clock. The ship got delayed for about 3 hours. I had to send a diver down to get underwater inspection. Now he's giving me a 1 year. I don't have to go dry dock for another 1 year. Right? If you look at safety, is very important. I'm asking for a 3-month extension for me to go to dry dock in October. Right? But they said, no, you do an underwater inspection, we'll give you an extension for 1 year. There's some shipping company here don't follow the rules. There's 2 rules in Fiji, one for Ghana shipping, okay, and one for the other shipping. And you know very well, I've always approached you, sir, I'm in trouble. And you always assist me out of this now. Because there should be one rule that applies for everybody. Right? Not for just because I'm very vocal in this industry, because I love this industry. Okay? I brought it up to standard by this government's assistant, I brought it up to standard up now. Okay? So what I'm saying is that there should be 2 systems, for one for the horsepower is a bench schema. The franchise should be transparent. It should be operated away from the ministry by like it used to be before, by the naval or some other organization, with transparency. Okay? There's 2 contracts. For 2 years now, the shipping company has shut down. Government contracts. But the contracts are still with this company. Right? So I was wondering why. Okay? Why is it not posted? Okay? Every month they send out an express of interest. Okay? We apply. They say, oh no, Ghana shipping has 5. Okay? No, we won't give to you. They give to another shipping company. Okay? It's not about who's getting the service. It's about how we service the outer islands. It's about providing a service. For me, it's not about money. It's never been about money. I have enough. The Lord has blessed me with it. It's about me providing a service to the islanders. Last month, I refused to go do franchise. I've been not paid for some of my franchise. And I look at the distance where how the franchise routes are organized. It's wrong. I'll give an example. I'll give a quick example. I have to go. For me to go to Natovi, I have to go the other way to Natovi, right? Rather than going the shorter distance. Like, I'll give an example from the upper southern Laos. They have Nayao. Nayao is closer to Vivia, right? I have to go to Vanuatu, then go a 4-hour steaming run to Nayao, then back up to Lakemba again. Okay? talk about fuel costs. I mean, every company, as an investor, I was like, how can I minimize the cost, right? But the government, the staff that organizes that, they said, Gowda, no, we will minus 20% of that because you didn't go there. I said, listen, my other shipping ship will do the run. So it should be more transparent if someone who understands how shipping works. Shipping is challenging, right? And as you know, when COVID came, the only industry that survived, that pushed through Fiji was shipping. Right? Tourism was short, everything was shut down. I had to run. I took a $4 million loss last year. I would have just shut my vessel down. Right? I took a $4 million loss last year, $1 million this year. Last year we had no passengers traveling, just cargo, straight cargo going on. Fuel last year was about $1.60 a litre. It's $3 something a litre now. For every fuel, every bunker I take is about 30,000 litres I bunker every trip. Just imagine, from $1.60 paying last year and $3 now, it's just too much for it. So I'm asking the government if they can do some assistance in restructuring how the franchises are awarded. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. This is the proposal for the franchise. Thank you, sir.
Great, thanks. Well, I think where we're subsidizing, for example, shipping, and even for aviation, because we also do subsidizing for them too. You know, for a plane to fly to Tandabu or Lao, etc., we call for tenders, and then we fund that particular route. Most definitely, of course, fuel costs have now have to be taken into account. And you know, it's interesting what you're proposing, and some of what you're saying in respect of the horsepower, obviously, you know, makes sense. But we'll have a look at the proposal. I just wanted to, before I forget, one of the things we did last year when we were looking at new ways of doing things, we said that if you went and visited a private doctor, we would pay for your costs. In particular, people who normally go to the health center or the public hospital, we'll pay for you to go and visit the private doctor. You know, if you went, for example, injection or just normal consultation, you got a headache, you go and see the doctor, and then we would actually pay for that cost. We've now expanded the services that's available to visit those doctors. And we had in fact called for expressions of interest from doctors. And initially the doctors gave one price. We said no individual doctors have to put in their own submission. So now, if you go and visit any of these private doctors, nebulizer, you know, full blood count, kidney, liver test, or you know, blood samples for that taken, for cholesterol, if they want to do ECG, if they've got ECG available, all of that, government will pay for if you visit a private doctor. Also, for example, if you have a small cut for them to do, you know, fix that up, injections, etc., all will be paid for. And the new doctors actually in your area, about Nasino, we have Makoi Health Center, which is in Nakasi Road, Makoi. Dr. Lalita Devi Keshwar Nadan Atish Prasad. Nasinu, Nandera in Garase Street. Rubina Medical Clinic and Research Center PT Limited, Dr. Roy Farrells and Dr. Muhammad Ali. Narere, you got Sen's Medical Center, Dr. Shantika Devi Sen. In Nakasi, Premium Care Medical Center PT Limited, Dr. Roman Chud, Rosana Burua, Nico Bakani, Manasa Balani Namau. All of these doctors, you can actually go and visit them and you won't pay a single cent. And they will do a urine test, the blood test, the diabetes test, all of that. Nakasi 9 Miles Medical Center, Dr. Ram Lochan, Dr. Anish Sharma, Semi Baroi, that's in Nakasi, Highway Plaza. And then you got Dr. Sharma's Medical Diagnostic Center, Dr. Anna Tungia and Monita Sharma in both Nasinu and Nakasi. One is at Tembara Plaza, the other one is at Ratu Dovi Road. So please take advantage of this and make use of these doctors. We did it initially because we did not want everybody to go to the, you know, the public hospital or the health center for some minor issue. Because a lot of people had COVID too, if you all lined up. And this also helps you develop a relationship with the doctor. If he goes and sees a doctor tomorrow because he's got a headache, the doctor normally nowadays they'll take your blood pressure, they'll do a quick urine test or blood sugar test. It's okay, I'll give you some antibiotics, go home. Next time, 2 months later, he goes and sees him, he'll do another blood test and a blood pressure test. He may say, hey, your sugar now is 6. You're only a young man, 28 years old. 28 years old. You should not be having a sugar of 6. Change your lifestyle. Go and do some exercise. Cut back on your sugar. Most people in Fiji, when they go, they can't afford to see a private doctor, they don't like waiting at the public hospital. So they'll have a cut on their foot. 2 months it doesn't get better, then they'll eventually go and see a doctor. The sugar level is 15 or 20, you have to cut off your toe. So we don't want people to lose limbs, we want people to remain healthy. So please take advantage of it. If you've forgotten what I read out, you can go to the government Facebook page and get all that information from there. Okay, any other questions, comments? The gentleman here.
Thank you, Mr. Reggie. I am came from Tambia, Lambasa. I have 2 issues which I want to just ask that in our area, Tambia is connected with some small villages too, not only the Tambia there, like Vunivadea, Nambolevu, Vuningari, Vatandova, and this is the area where there is no government water supply till now. The water is connected up to the Waingili sawmill, Galewanga, and we still need of the water. So up to Tambia College School also haven't got the government water supply, which is meter system, is not still connected. We requested till this government came. One of the gentlemen from this government went to Tambia Primary. He did one welcome people of the village for the bring your issues, what you people need, so that we can give it to the Fiji First government, and he will do it for you. We lost this complaint, that guy. I don't know where is that guy, I don't know his name, I forget. But we still haven't got that government system water till now. About 16 years, I think this Fiji First government has been running, I think. 14, eh? Yeah. So people in my village are still waiting the water, say, and we are
So what were you doing before that? All these years, how long have you been living there?
People?
Yeah, the people living there, how long have they been living there? 40, 50 years, 60 years?
About more than 40, 50.
So what did they do for water then?
Then we all got the well water system. Still myself also got the well. My house is located on the main highway. There's plenty of houses, and we fixed the motor pump, electric pump, to pump the water in the tank and use it. When the dry system comes, the water goes dirty and the water goes down. For cooking problem, bathing problem, washing problem, every types of problem we create that time. And not only myself that they have the well. If you could may come to welcome you to our village, you come, then you can see house to house and count the well. How many wells are there, well water, every people got in that village. Sometimes people, they could do the dirty creek. When water is not there, and the water cart just running with the tank, big trucks, 10 wheelers. We don't know. When we ask them, they supply, they're going to Nambolevu, go to Vuningari. They just fill half of the tank water and just make the cartridge.
So the Water Authority Fiji pipe water, how far away is it from where you live?
It is up to Waingili sawmill. Waingili sawmill, it is connected, the government meter system.
And how far is Wangele sawmill from where you live?
About 2.5 to 3 kilometers from my house. I am just beside the road, and it's a very busy road, highway Tambia, as you may be knowing. And we, our village people, every time saying the government election is just coming nearby again, and Fiji first government has not given our water till now. Where the Rathumara government was there, Garase government was there. When the campaigning time comes, people say, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do this, we'll do that. Nothing has been done, say. And we are very humble, doing the humble request for this government has done a lot. We are proud of it. In Banua Levu, the road improvement from Namwalu, Lambasa, bridge, everything for schools, people, students, and many more things. This government is good. I'm very happy with this government. But only thing, if you might connect this water to our Tambia College School, every problem is solved. No more problem. If you connect this water, sir, up to Tambia School, every problem. Never mind we suffer the poor for the in the groceries, buying groceries, poor. We know hard time. Hard time. We don't run up after the budget. Budget is budget. We can't fight with the budget. Every people should know about economic. We see in the TV, in the radio, everything. It is not that. So please, Minister, I request you if you can welcome in my village, Tambia school or anywhere. They put one borehole system, and they made that build the tank on the very high mountain where that pump could not pump the water to that reservoir. Could not pump the water there. About 3 times that pump bent and break down. When there was a committee, they formed that one, and they could not buy another what you call pump again. And they request the number of houses, 12, 18 house people, they were using that water. But when they request for the money, people, to give the solely, we can buy the pump, they said, no, throw it out. We don't want this water. We want a government meter system water. What is this water? We go to every village, Raketi, Nambualu, Nanduri, we see the tap water, how the people are using. And we are using this dirty borehole water, which is not working. So please, that was my question. And another issue, if this government can build a police post in Tambia. Because of too much breaking in this area, I don't know why. Police post. If these two, but first the water must come.
Water, all the problem will be solved.
Yeah, will be solved.
So we do the water, no need to build a police post.
Yeah, you bring the water first.
Okay.
Never mind police post come back or not. But
can you please leave your name and your contact details with the staff? We find out, because look, there are a number of projects that we have identified, both with electrification and also water projects. Maybe it's in the scope of what Water Authority wants to do. We can let you know if it's this year, next year, whenever it is, we can come back and let you know. But please leave your name and contact details at the back. Okay? And give the exact location of the place.
Okay,
Thank you.
Take care, sir. Thank you.
Not from Lambasa, are you?
No, my in-laws are from Lampasa. Good evening, sir. There are a few questions. First one, for the Itokai land, for the surveying one, I think it is best for the TLTB, while giving the land to the owners, I mean like the ones who buy, it would be better for them to have it surveyed and have it exactly pegged, rather than giving it for agreement of lease 50 years and then the owners run around for surveying. So my grievance was last budget consultation. Till now, no one has come to me. I went to TLTB just last week. I did get the contact of the surveyor. Till in the afternoon, I was contacting them, but both phone numbers are switched off.
Can you just leave your contact details there? We've got somebody working on it. As you would have heard in the revised budget, we've made some announcements regarding that. The TLTB now will be doing the survey approach very differently. I know what used to happen before. They used to do their own marking, then they get a surveyor, then they do their own again, and used to have a lot of differences in terms of the boundaries that used to happen. So as announced in the revised budget, we've changed that system. As announced, the Prime Minister is also on the chair. They've agreed to change all of that to make it easier for people who want to lease. But regarding your specific one, please leave your contact details. We've got somebody working on that at the moment.
Yeah, and second thing, it has also happened maybe with everybody. Like all the documentations, for example, the birth certificates, if we have it certified by the JP, when we go to some of the government stations, like Register of Titles, we took there with all the IDs photocopied, certified by the lawyer or the JP, and they say no, they need the originals. So can you just look into this matter? If everybody needs original, then what is the purpose of the JP stamp or the lawyer stamp? If they are not accepting that, then what's the use of using those kind of services? Thank you.
Because of what you are saying, because we've seen in the past where people have photocopied birth certificates, and the stamp is actually a photocopy also. Yeah, but sometimes it's hard to distinguish. You know it's original, but I can get a fantastic photocopy, or I can look original. So that's why in particular things like title, and now you don't have to pay for birth certificates, as you know. So that's one of the reasons. There's a bit of fraud that was going on at one point in time. People were actually giving fraudulent birth certificates. Brother stealing from father, father stealing from son, and all those kind of things were happening. So that's why the titles office became a bit cautious about that. Yeah, so it's not about that the JP certificate has no value. It does. I mean, a lot of people accept it. But I think for things like titles in particular properties, they're being a bit cautious about it. Over here, please.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Still on birth certificate. My two children were born in South Lebanon. In Lebanon. They were issued with Lebanese birth certificate. And when I retired last year, I was working for United Nations for 25 years. I've been working many parts of the world. I came to Fiji and want to get a Fiji birth certificate. And the problem is, when you get a birth certificate in Middle East, they give you in Arabic. They write in Arabic. Your name is not spelled correctly. If my name is Eroni, they will hear that, then they write that based on Arabic words. So it's very hard for us. Even if I lost my original birth certificate for my two children, I have to go back to Lebanon. I have to write to Lebanon. And then it takes a lot of paperwork and all, time consuming. And in the end, maybe I will not get a replacement one. And speaking on people who work overseas and retired back to Fiji, if you could revise the subject on birth certificates for our children that are born overseas, on our Fiji returned nationals who work overseas and are here retired in Fiji. Thank you.
Easy, actually. It's a bit difficult. A birth certificate is basically an indication of where you were born. And that's issued by the country in which you were born. So, you know, we have Fijians who've had their children born in Australia, for example. And recently they've acquired citizenship in Fiji. So those Australian birth certificates are used, but they don't necessarily get a Fijian birth certificate. If it's a question of, we've had those issues where people have had birth certificates issued, for example, in Spanish, some in Arabic, some in, Hindi, Sanskrit Hindi, in other countries. You can get translations done. Once you get the translations done, it's recognized, then you can also in Fiji, once it's recognized, you can go and do a name change also. That could fix up things like the spelling errors, etc. But that certificate needs to be used. In the same way, on the flip side, we've had people who've come to Fiji as foreigners, and after living in Fiji for 10, 15 years, they've become Fijian citizens. For them to have their passports issued, they have to rely on the birth certificates of the country that's actually issued them the passport in the first place, for them to get the Fijian passport. Some have subsequently changed their names, and therefore then they get a passport under the new name. So I mean, if you want, you can write to the Ministry of Justice. You can write to us. You can give you an email address, but you'll have to get the original birth certificate. You can get people to translation. We've had people who had it translated. Yeah, you need the original and the translated one. As long as it's certified, then you can get that done. There's ways around. You can work that, get the right name. Okay. We've had, look, we do get a lot of issues around that. In a lot of countries, a birth certificate is actually called a name registration certificate. Right. So we've had issues in the past where we had somebody who was from Fiji originally, went to another country, had what they call a gender reassignment. In other words, became a female, and then came to Fiji and wanted the birth certificate to be changed from male to female. We didn't allow that, because that's what you were born as at the point of your birth time. So those are the kind of things that we have in a lot of situations too. We have also, for example, adoption, when people adopt children. Who do they put as a parent? Those are the issues that we do face on a daily basis. But you can write to us and we can see what can be done. But if you have this birth certificate, it will be helpful. And they can change the name. There's nothing stopping you. And name change now does not cost a single cent. You have to fill out the form. You can't get a Fijian birth certificate, no. Not as a replacement for that. Yeah? So you can, once you get the name registered, you can then, for example, have that recognized. You can then make your passport on that basis. Once the name is recognized, it gets registered, but it's not like a birth certificate like she's born in Fiji, but you're not going to get a birth certificate like hers. You can get a name registration over here of that name. Once the name is registered, then you can go in. If you want to change it, you can change it through a name registration form. Yeah? Gentleman there? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Minister. Just to add on the birth certificate issue that we face. Like I'm a Canadian citizen. My wife is a Canadian citizen also. We're a Fiji citizen. All our documents are done through our previous birth certificates. My wife is a Wati. She got married, she became a Gounder. But when we did our documents in Canada, all our retirement plan and everything is on the original birth certificate she has, which is Wati. So now she's due for a passport now. She's got a Canadian passport and a Fijian passport. Fijian passport, she's got Gounder now. But to renew her passport, she has to change the birth certificate to Gounder. Now it affects our situation in Canada now. Because all she doesn't
have Gounder. She can have Wati.
But no.
That's a choice. That's a choice.
But on the passport.
Sorry?
The passport has to be identical to the birth certificate.
Yes.
Yes. So now she has to change either one of them. Either she become a Wati or becomes a Gaunda. But all our documents in Canada since we got married is in Gaunda. Right?
Yes.
The birth certificate is in Wati. So now we have to go to Canadian government and say, listen, now she's no longer a Wati, she's a Gaunda. So our investment, our pension gets affected now.
No, but surely they allow for name change. All countries allow for name change. It doesn't get affected at all. It allows for name change. You simply have to choose which one you want to go by.
But all our documents, like when we first started,
What's a birth certificate in?
is Wati.
So you go by the birth certificate. And if all other documents, what I'm saying,
Yeah.
as far as Fiji is concerned,
Right.
right, as far as Fiji is concerned, if a birth certificate is Wati and she has a passport in Gaunda,
Gaunda, yeah.
then she chooses. If she wants to remain as a Gaunda, she can go do a name registration change and she becomes a Gaunda in a birth certificate. She can do that. So you can still keep Gaunda.
Right. But the issue we'll face, like when we apply for a visa for Australia now,
Yeah,
or the US now,
yeah.
right? She has to change, if she changes her passport, right?
But I thought the passport was already in Gaunda.
Oh, she's already a Gaunda.
Yeah.
But now the passport and the birth certificate, they don't match.
Yeah, but then you can then change what I'm saying, the birth
Right.
certificate, to make it Gaunda.
But now, okay, she changed it. Now when she goes to Canada with this new birth certificate, and goes to Canada and says now she's no longer a Wati, she's a Gaunda now.
Yeah.
Then the Canadian government will come say, how can you issued us a Wati 30 years ago?
Yeah. But you show them the name registration change.
For Fiji?
Yeah.
Okay.
Simple.
Okay. The other is the other issue is regarding the FCCC.
Yes.
Our rate's been frozen for the last 7 years. And the thing is, how FCCC want us to do business is not practical. They want us to weigh every item. I sometimes come in about 500-600 bags of coconut from the outer islands. Okay, so if I weigh it, it's about 10 cents or 15 cents a kilo, or 8 cents a kilo. So one bag will be $2, $10, $6, everything. So we requested FCCC for the last 7 years, please make it a flat rate. Right? Everybody knows a flat rate. Rather than me weighing it, for me to weigh a bag, for one bag takes 7 minutes. By the time I weigh it, write the bill, and she goes pays it, it's about 7 minutes. Just same as if I get about 1,000 bags on board the vessel. It takes a lot of time. So we're asking the FCCC, make it practical. How do I get a cow on a scale or pig on a scale to weigh? Okay? That's how they want us to do that. I've got fined many times, but I'm still refusing to do that because it's not practical. All we're asking is if it can be more practical, where we have a fixed base, like it's either $5. I recall it's the last 10 years, everybody charges $5 for a bag. Right? So that's practical. Everybody knows that it's $5. For now, they said now they want us to go and get a scale. Every ship, like he owns a shipping company, they want a scale on board the vessel. They said, while the vessel is traveling, you've got to scale every item in there. He's got a cargo hold. How do you open up a cargo hold and start weighing everything? It's not practical. All we request is somebody can review that and try to get some sense into the system.
Have you made submissions?
Yes, we've made it for the last 7 years now. Nothing's been done. 7 years.
Have you got something in writing?
In writing, we've got in writing. The last one.
Can you send us something in writing?
Sure.
Very quickly, it's going to close.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
In respect of the other one, we have a number of issues. Like, it's a very simple thing regarding the name. People tend to complicate it. And, I'll give you an example. There's a lady who was in Fiji. Her passport was under the husband's name. Right. And she had a birth certificate, it's different name, surname. But when she going to get vaccinated, obviously, Ministry of Health has used a birth certificate name. Right? That's what they've used.
Yes, yeah.
That's the only authentic documentation. So the vaccine card is under her birth certificate name. Passport is under the married name. American Embassy said, no, we don't recognize it. We recognize the birth certificate name. Unless you've changed it formally, then we'll recognize that name. Sorry, you can't go. So, the birth certificate, or what we call name registration certificate, is the most authentic form. People have changed names previously also, before this new law was introduced, 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years ago. You had to go and change your name by deed poll, legally. Pay a lawyer $500, $600. Then there'd be a change. So if you change your name that's on your birth certificate, there's a name registration form, you fill it out, it legally gets done. There's a record at the back in the system that shows what your name was previously. So if, for example, you go to Canada or whatever, you can show that to them. They'll recognize it's authorized by the government of Fiji.
That's all.
Yeah.
There's only some document behind it.
Yeah. You see an asterisk. Ladies and gentlemen, if there is no other questions or comments, thank you very much for your participation. Oh, there's one. Sorry, my apologies.
Right. So I would just like to corroborate what this gentleman has said earlier on. Okay, it's safer to have the mask on anyway. So I'd just like to corroborate what this gentleman earlier on said about the fact that when you go to certain statutory organizations and then try to execute transactions with them, then there's a lot of documents that they require. And in fact, a lot of people would agree that executing any transaction at the Land Transport Authority takes a lot of time. In fact, the other day I was timing, and I could see that it approximately took 15 to 20 minutes for rather simple transactions to be done.
Transaction was it?
I mean, any transaction.
No, but you said it was a simple transaction. What was the transaction?
For instance, getting the fitness of a vehicle done, right? Which is fairly routine transaction, I would say.
Well, it depends. It depends. When you're getting a fitness for a vehicle, obviously the vehicle has to be checked out for fitness. It's not just the documentation itself. It's the whole process that you have to go through. I mean, you said you went there, so if you can, I want a practical example, because I know, and there's no doubt that there's a lot of processes in LTA that does need to improve. There's no doubt about that. But there are many areas that made changes too. So for example, before, if you had a fine, recently I got fined for speeding, and then my wife actually just paid it on M-Pesa. Before you could not do that, you actually had to go and line up and pay for it. So the reason I'm asking is because then I can give them some feedback, as opposed to some kind of generalized statement.
Yeah, that's it. The fact that if you go to LTA, even though they have previously verified your identity, they would need a original birth certificate, for instance, or if they want to verify your TIN number, they would then require you to go to FRCS again and then wait in a queue that would be there and then come back, even though they have those details already on the system, in their system, that is. And then one of the things is that their seva seems to be pretty slow, and it takes a lot of time for them to upload scanned documents and so forth onto the system. One of the recent changes that they have made, if you'd like to have a transfership of a vehicle done, now you're actually required, both parties are required to go to a JP, and then the JP has to witness the transfer form, on the transfer form. And then the interesting thing is, when you come back to LTA, you actually need both the parties to be there for the LTA officer to again verify that both parties are in agreement. So that entire requirement for going to a JP obviously doesn't make sense, because then you have to come back to LTA with both parties present, and then only will LTA effect the transfer. So that is the sort of paraphernalia that appears to be attached to a number of transactions, which I hope can be looked at, and then some of these things can be streamlined, because a lot of Fijians will agree that there's a lot of time that is wasted when you go and want to carry out a typical transaction at LTA, and obviously that has an impact on productivity also in the country. So I hope that something would be done in relation to this. The other point that I'd like to, this is essentially a proposal that I'd like to put across. As a resident of Nakasi, of course, this is a highly populated area. And if you look at the greater Suva area in general, I think around a third of Fiji's entire population actually resides, between Lami and Nosori. And you have mentioned that there's a lot of focus on improving health services, and there's essentially just single divisional hospital that is servicing this 1/3 of Fiji's entire population. And it would make a lot of sense to also decentralize, the provision of health in the greater Suva area. And I think Nakasi is, perhaps one of the most appropriate places to consider. In fact, I was a tad bit disappointed when I actually saw that there was a new police station being built right next to the Nakasi Health Center, because that was very good space for extension of the Nakasi Health Center, possibly into a major divisional hospital. So I think, I hope that the government is going to really consider, because you would agree that the urban planning that we have in Fiji certainly suffers from a lot of problems. One of the major drawbacks in the GSA being the fact that we've got a monocentric model where everybody commutes in the same direction and so forth. So sort of to reduce some of the pressures that are there, I think it would be a good idea to consider. The third aspect, and this is in relation to the budget. In fact, it is good to see that the government intends to have fiscal consolidation in the next, the upcoming fiscal year. Although I'd say that is something that wasn't entirely anticipated, especially in an election year. And but I think it's a very prudent thing to do, and it's a highly desirable also to maintain fiscal stability and so forth. One of the things you have said that you would now want the state to withdraw a bit from, I have been one of those proponents of, the state driving the economy, particularly in the years since we had the COVID-19 pandemic. So one of the things that you have said, that the private sector will have to take the lead in the post-COVID-19 recovery. In fact, this is highly desirable. But realistically speaking, how realistic do you think it is that the private sector will indeed have the capacity to take to play a more perhaps important role in driving the post-COVID-19 recovery? Thanks.
Let me start with the last first. We are confident. As you can see at the moment, I can give you some stuff. George also said before that he's very grateful for the environment provided. Of course, there's things that need to iron out. But if you look at now, shipping services between Natovi and Nambuwalu can go as low as what, 25, 30 bucks? You couldn't do that before. We made a number of changes, of course, where the duty was zero rated or 5%. Before, the duty used to be 32%, plus. So it's a liberalization of the rules and the economy, which has led to a lot of private sector growth. There's a lot of competition. His competitors take 25 bucks, he does 30 bucks, the trucks go on free or whatever it is. That leads to economic activity. The fact that you have now a Tahsil road all the way from Nambuwalu to Lambasa has really made it easy for people to travel. You go down Suva Point and along the seawall, the gentleman behind you from Tambia, maybe he's here on a holiday. But my point is that if you go down the Suva seawall on the weekend, you have people actually have come with their cars from Lambasa, from Tambia, from Draketi, from Wainikoro, from Siberia, come for the weekend to eat McDonald's and go back. It's true. Ask him. That's what you call private sector led economic growth. It creates a lot of local tourism. At the moment, there are 3 projects between Lautoka and Nandi, about $150 million worth of projects is about to get started. All private sector funded. Large bulk stores, bulk warehouse, factories being built, showrooms, etc. In fact, it's about $200 million worth. This private sector-led growth. The other thing, of course, is that, as I talked to you about liquidity, I don't know if were you here from the beginning? You were, okay. So if you look at the liquidity, which is why we were very critically, we were concerned about liquidity being low. If in 2019 and 2020 liquidity was that much, we needed to ensure that liquidity was high enough to be able to bring the interest rates down. So when the economy does open up, people do invest. The cost of the funds needs to be less. That's why we've got high levels of liquidity, and the interest rates are actually coming down. As I said, there are people currently borrowing at less than 5.6%. So all of those things obviously contribute to private sector-led growth. It does not mean that government will, I don't know why you brought in elections and fiscal consolidation unless you yourself have got a political agenda. And that's why you brought politics into it. The point that I'm making is that we obviously have always been prudent about it. Election or no election, right? I know some people, maybe you, think along election lines. We don't. When we do the budget, we don't think along election lines. So it is critical to do fiscal consolidation, election or no election. In the same way, we could have done an election thing and made a lot more items VAT, zero-rated VAT. We could have done an election thing and said VAT not to be increased to 15%. There are certain items you're paying 15% VAT. It tells you and everybody else that we're being financially prudent. It tells our money lenders and our development partners we're not some Mickey Mouse outfit. That we're also prudent about our finances. If we're going to make 0%, we lost $163 million by making things 0% VAT. We have to do some recovery. You buy perfume, you buy stereo, you buy camera and other luxury items, TV, you'll pay 15% VAT. You're not an essential item, but we need to collect that money. That's what we call prudent management of finances. As we've also said, that we will continue to invest. The government is not going to pull out. We'll continue to invest in education, health service improvements, infrastructure, connectivity, public utilities. You go down King's Road, you see how many bridges there are being built. Tavua Bridge. 2 bridges after Tavua Bridge. The bridge near Fiji Water, Naseani. All of these bridges are being built. It's economic activity. You go to Malevu, down the Coral Coast, around that bend. Bridges being built. Vele Volo, whatever it's called, near Warimbitia. A lot of bridges are being built. Question that people need to ask is, why are those bridges being built? You go to certain parts in Fiji where the roads were built, the bridges were built in CSR days. Those bridges are still working and function, they can take trucks. Bridges that were built in the 1970s are failing now. Why? Why? Substandard. Corruption. Instead of 10 cubic meters of concrete, they'll put 3 cubic meters of concrete. We are now paying for that. Those are the systemic issues you need to be able to ask in question. So we will obviously continue to invest. The health services that you talked about, you see, again, this, what you said is actually an old way of thinking. You're saying, why only one divisional hospital? We need to get out of this divisional way of thinking. That's an old colonial construct. In the same way the old colonial construct was, you have one big bus stand, you have one big market next to it. All the towns have that. Go everywhere in Fiji, Lambasa market, market bus stand, Suva market bus stand, Singatoka, Nandi, Tavua, Ba, everywhere. All routes will start from there and then come back. You want to travel to Valelevu from Suva, you catch a bus from Suva to Valelevu. You want to go to Nepani, you have to catch a bus from Nepani to Suva. If I want to go from Nepani to Valelevu, I can't, there's no bus route. So technically, if I want to go by bus, for me to go from Nepani to Valelevu, which is across the highway, I have to catch the bus from Nepani, go all the way back to Suva, then catch the other bus that goes all the way to Valelevu. That's stupid, actually, frankly. And we've obviously come up with a solution. We've already announced we're building a new bus terminal in Balelevu. It will be running within the suburban areas. We're putting another one over here. We've already announced in Parliament. You obviously seem to be very well read and listened to. We've already announced in Parliament twice that we'll be running buses in this area. Now, if we tell people, for example, if we tell somebody who's living down the street, look, why are you driving to Suva? Right? It takes you, what, hour and 20 minutes, peak period maybe? Why drive to Suva? Take the bus. The highway on the bus will reserve the left lane for you. Go. The person will then say to us, how will I get from there? The lady just complained about the bus shelter. How will I get from there to the main road? Where will I park my car? Because I don't want to walk in the rain to go to the main road to catch the bus, right? So we have to have a system in place that will encourage you to catch a bus that maybe run around this area to take you to the highway. Then I take the main bus and I go to Suva. We've already announced in Parliament, we're moving certain government offices to the Nasinu area. We've already earmarked it. We've already announced which ministries they are going to be. Ministry of Education. Ministry of Education at the moment is in 12 buildings throughout Suva. Exams in one building, one is there in Rajibai Patel Street, one is stuck in some Turek somewhere. It's been like that for decades. So we're going to move all of that into one building out of Suva. Absolutely right. We need people to travel a different way. A lot of people who work in Suva live here, live in Nandera, live in Nepani, live in Makoi. Rather than going to Suva, if the office is here, they'll travel this way. That's what we're doing. We already announced that. We're moving that, education, we're moving women, children poverty alleviation, youth and sports. There are three major ones. And the buildings actually will be built according to the way we want it. Before, what was the system? You have this building, I'm renting it out. Government will come and take this building. Then we try and change it to suit us. Nasilavata House, which used to be a cinema in Samambula. You know how much rent they signed an agreement for 20 years ago? Over $200,000 a year. No windows. It used to be a cinema. It didn't have windows. Then they punched some windows at the back of the building. That's the legacy we left with. So these new offices we're going to build will be built according to what we want. If it's going to be 6 stories, we at least have a breakout area for the staff. The civil servants get a good environment to work in. Half the problem is a lot of the civil servants, unfortunately, those poor civil servants have to work in buildings that is not suitable for them to be habitating. That's the problem. So those things are being done. But I think there's one other issue, LTA. Yeah, I mean, look, LTA, I mean, if you give me some specific examples, I'll give you my email address, aiyazsk@gmail.com, send me the issue. We've got a new chairman, James Sawane. We just got a new CEO also. I'm sure many people will agree that the new CEO of FRCS has made tremendous changes. In the same way, the new CEO of FDB has made tremendous changes. There have been huge leaps and bounds in terms of the way services are being delivered. So you're hoping LTA will also improve. The only way we'll improve, that's why I asked for specific examples. You know, if you tell us which is the area, you gave one example about the JPs. And we found also that sometimes, certain bureaucrats, they create their own systems without us even knowing about it, right? So we need the public feedback. That's why we value this thing. We need public feedback objectively, and then we can fix it up. Because, we've seen sometimes, like a very basic thing like tobacco license. Right? The law was, which is very old law, for you to sell suki, for you to sell cigarettes, you have to get a tobacco license. And the license given to you on a yearly basis. The Ministry of Health, which issues the license, had a requirement now that if you want the Suki license, you have to have a business name, it must be updated, you have to get a certificate. So only this year, somebody from company's office said, no, so there's 500 people outside. So what for? Or name registration. Why? Tobacco license. So we came to know about it, we said, okay, so we brought an amendment in Parliament. some opposition, people objected to it. Very simple, business process. We said now if I apply for Suki license, should be for 5 years. I pay for my 5-year license. Ministry of Health job is to go and do spot check if you're doing anything wrong. Gravel extraction license, we say it should be for 5 years. So in that way people also invest. They feel comfortable. Why should I, if I'm selling Suki in the Yasao, I have to catch one boat every year to come and pay for my Suki license in Lotoka or somewhere? You know what I mean? It's inconvenient. In the same way, for example, LTA, if they're doing certain things they should not be doing, we'll have to know about it and change it. Okay? If there is no other questions, please.
Sir, one question. Can you have a consultation with the shipping industry?
Sure.
That's only one thing we're lacking on, and these are the long issues that we can solve.
Sure. After the budget.
But yeah. Thank you, sir.
Okay. If there are no more questions, it's 10:30. As interesting as it is, I mean, I wish it was a bit earlier. My apologies for the delay. We just had to catch a flight and came a bit late. Look, thank you for your participation. Like I said, at the moment that if you have any burning issue, like the gentleman about LTA, you can send your issues to this email address, budgetconsultation@economy.gov.fj. I'm sure we can look at this. Sometimes, you know, we do make, in the budget, you would have seen that we do bring about some legal amendments just to improve services and processes that will help us. One of the areas that was announced in the revised budget, this Nakasi area, we're looking at getting it commercial also. Certain, you know, blocks going back from the highway. Because every time, you know, it's a growing commercial area, somebody wants to convert that house into a shop, or someone wants to sell clothes here, they have to go and get it rezoned. Rather than doing all of that, we rezone the entire thing. And it's your choice. You don't, if you're using it as a residential place, you pay the residential rate. You don't have to pay the commercial rate. But if it becomes commercial, it's easier for you. You don't have to go through the rezoning process. It actually reduces the cost of doing rezoning too. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. If there are any of your personal issues, please, there's staff at the back. You can highlight the issues. Please leave your phone number and contact. Okay? Thank you. The budget will be announced on the 15th of July at about 7:38 p.m. As you know, by law, once we announce the budget, what we announce in the budget only comes into effect once the budget is passed. But the only thing that comes into effect from midnight, from that night, is that if we make any tariff changes. The tariff rates then kick in at midnight. Everything else basically comes into effect once the budget is passed. So by law, once the budget is announced on the 15th, we have 1 week's break in Parliament, and then we debate the budget, and then God willing gets passed on that Friday. Okay, and the financial year starts from the 1st of August to 31 July. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I wish you a good evening. Naka, thanks.